he start screaming? Candace, why does he start screaming? Why does your child start screaming when you touch them? I have never heard of a more serious red flag.
So you came to bring the kid back, right?
Yes.
For my children.
Okay. You don't want to get off?
No, sir, I'm scared to go in.
You're scared to go in.
You want to stay with your dad?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
And you're willing to take him?
Why are you scared to go in? No, I have legal custody.
Doesn't matter. We can't do nothing about that, man.
I'm scared to go in.
Why are you
especially
scared?
after right now.
Nothing's going to happen to you, baby. I just want a hug.
I don't know what he's scared about. Well, I don't know what he's scared about. There might have been something that happened.
I love that this officer heard the bare minimum. The other guy heard Parker say, you hit me and you choked me before, and he still told the mom that she could get the boy out of the car. This dude just came up, barely heard any of it, and he said, no. Go home. Go be with your dad. Go. If I recall, she did take him to court for this, and he did get in trouble. But in my opinion, worth it, and I would do it again, and I would do it again, and again, and again. I think the dad handled it as well as he could have in this situation. Of course, she was going to take him to court, but sometimes you got to take a stand, bro.
I mean, you have it on your recording that says you're free to go. If she tries to call it in saying you kidnapped her kid, we're not going to do nothing about it. You can show the officer. Yes! At the end of this video.
Do y'all have a business card by chance?
No, sir, I do not, but like you said, I'm Officer Brandon Spinks, so that's the police department, badge number 147.
Okay.
This video is good because it's got a good ending, at least in the video. Get in there! Don't follow him. Oh, now she's turning on the officers. Come on, Parker, hurry up! She's coming! Let's go! And now he's, yeah. Bye, Candace. Bye. Caleb, hit the gas. Let's get out of here, boy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Falling behind.
They just walked away from her,
She tried to slam the door to my own room and forced me to stay there. I pushed her as, I would say, self-defense. I did not assault her.
We got the lead. Now hold it.
Hey, I'm glad that was on camera too. Let's go, Parker. Let's go.
Move.
That is so crazy. That is so... It's not often that you get to see all of those tactics in real time, but I think the reason why... I mean, first of all, she's a real-life villain, but, you know, at the end of it all, we got a little bit of a happy ending. Hopefully my therapy's been working and I'm less triggered, but we'll find out. Well, since we're in the Christmas spirit, of parental narcissism. So the beginning of this says, my dad interrupted me to help him with a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know PowerPoint, but I came down to help him. Looked through the app, figured out how to rotate an image, and showed it. After showing him, he mused around looking for another way, basically ignoring what I had just shown him. As I left, my dad shouts out,
Walking away is not necessarily obnoxious. Just yelling at somebody, that's a little obnoxious. That's a little obnoxious. And that says something right there. If you're uncomfortable with that.
what was that? What?
And that says something right there. If you're uncomfortable with that shows something.
Assume the position.
You say, listen.
You're asking me.
You're asking.
No, you're asking for trouble. Well,
It would have been impossible.
How?
Wow, there's so much there right there. You're asking for trouble. Even the sharp stop it. It's giving you a lot of emotion to make you think you're doing something wrong. Stop it. You're asking for trouble. I mean, that's a threat. Can you imagine being in this environment? I think this is the grandma and then that's the dad. You don't have any allies in this. His only ally in this situation is the camera.
It's a simple question.
Being upset, making you feel like you're doing something wrong. Making it about herself. I don't feel good. You're making me feel bad. Look at all the tools that she just cycled through in like 30 seconds. And you haven't even gotten to the dad yet.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. You're not getting it. But we don't have to argue. Let's settle this. Let's settle this comment. It's
not filming. I have asked you in the past not to film me unless you get my permission. You're doing it against my wishes. That is wrong.
you know what? I'm not doing this. You want to hear why I'm doing it? I think it might be a good idea.
Sandy, please turn that off.
I'm not recording you right now. Listen, I think it's a good idea. I think it would be a good idea. I think. Can you? You want to see? Because you don't let me talk, and you disagree with everything I say. Listen, if I record it, then you can look at it. Grimmer, then you.
Or video. Turn it off right now. Turn it off, please.
No, because it is a family, and
oh my God, so many tools. I don't consent to you recording me. I mean, I get that in some contexts, but here it's just a power play. This is a family. What the f? That's preying on how we're sociologically ingrained to trust family, right? It's basically saying, you're supposed to trust me on like your deepest psychological level. It's like when you work at a company and they say, hey, we're a team. Hey, we're a family.
You don't turn your back on family.
And this can help you see. I see you guys. You're screaming. No, I'm not screaming.
You're screaming?
Gee, you guys are. I thought it would be a good idea to bring a recorder since you guys are in denial about what you say and how you treat me.
This is absolutely unpardonable. This is not right.
I thought it would be a good idea. It's impossible to have a conversation.
People against their wishes. That is wrong.
This is like.
You turn that thing.
And it's wrong for you to deny. And
you're causing an argument and filming it. That is absolutely wrong.
I'm not.
They're trying so hard to shut down the camera because think about it this way, like with the two of them, it's 2 versus 1, but the camera is an incredibly powerful ally. It's like automatically having 2 people on that team. He doesn't know how to handle the camera. He doesn't know where this is going to go. He doesn't understand why he's recording. It's confusing him so much, so he must shut down the camera by any means necessary. And I think that's going to be entirely the objective. But what would essentially happen is over time, because he can't control that element, the dad would spin out of control. I'm curious, but I think that's what's going to happen.
I was trying to solve an argument by this.
That's not a way to solve an argument, man.
It is.
You know that.
No, it is for normal people. You can absorb yourself.
That's wrong.
Did he say?
I'm telling you how I wanted to use it.
How?
I wanted to use it so that we can solve this little problem. Because listen, I wanted. You don't even let me finish a sentence. I haven't said one sentence. No, you're not gonna grab it.
Then take it away.
Fine, I will move away. Just leave me alone, okay?
You're just going to stay there. Just go. Let's go.
I'm leaving. Why do you yell at me when I'm leaving?
Get the
You don't
camera
yell at
away.
somebody to
Get it
leave when
away.
they're already leaving.
You are being obnoxious.
Eileen, would you please talk to your...
I decided to start recording because they're both calling me obnoxious for giving my dad. He's nuts.
Nothing to
He's
be
nuts.
gained. It's adding fuel to the fire.
Especially in the middle I disagree. You gotta be kidding. You can't challenge me.
An environment like this, being raised in something like this from a pretty young age or essentially during like your formative years is going to make you very, very, very untrusting of the world. And you're not going to have a firm grasp on what is right or wrong in social relationships because this is what you were shown. And it always made you feel really uneasy. And then you're going to go out into the world and you're not, it's going to sound strange, but you're not going to know what's right and what's wrong in terms of how you should be treated. They're trying to drag another person into it.
I do not want myself filmed in the middle of an argument.
What are you now?
Please don't tell him to turn that thing off. I just did. He's not listening. He's
Trying to recruit somebody.
Please erase it. And then if you can help me with what I asked him for to begin with, which was simply to change a photo on a PowerPoint rather than.
I don't know how that can happen. I don't know how that can escalate.
Because he walked away when I asked him to help me. Just walked
Then
away.
that's the, good deal with it.
After I recommended something,
I'm not getting in the middle of an argument. Obviously, it's greater than me.
Just trying to do my work.
I'm just trying to do something so simple. God, the minimization.
I'm going to go swim at 11 o'clock.
do you want to go on a walk or a
Well,
trail?
we were going to we were going to swim at 11.
I mean, if that's what you want to do.
I mean, that's what we had planned to do.
It's all what you want. It's fine.
Yeah, I'd like
I'm
to
gonna go walk.
I don't blame you. It's a good healthy thing to do.
Show me that he deleted. He's so scared of the camera. How embarrassed. He doesn't know how to handle this. Then we're going to have a problem.
What?
Matthew, I want that. I want you to show me that that has been deleted.
Oh my God.
Once you
He's so
show that to me that it's been deleted,
The dad,
then we can
this
get
is
back on track.
embarrassing.
I do not.
I don't care. Why would I do that?
That's right.
Why would you do it?
What's the big deal?
Decent.
No, what? It's decent not to raise.
It's decent, implicative of you're a bad person if you don't do this. That's how so many of us end up walking this earth with random feelings of shame. Like it. He's literally tricking him into telling himself that he's a bad person if he doesn't do this thing, and that is so dark.
Your voice, make demands, call people obnoxious.
Matthew, I hate to tell you this, but we're all human beings here, and we all have a threshold. You don't take pictures of someone for the purpose of showing other people in their upset mood. That is absolutely blackmail.
He's
It's wrong.
embarrassed.
There was nothing.
Talk to someone. You don't.
There was no threat. There's no blackmail. If you listen to me, I wanted to record your point of view, my point of view.
You can want whatever you want, but that doesn't make it right.
I was hoping with some people with a camera in their face, they listen.
I don't want to be filmed when I'm talking to you in the middle of an argument.
Because I want to be able to do whatever I want to do to you behind closed doors and that you will have no proof. I can't do it if you have proof.
That is wrong.
All right, you made your point.
Well, I not only made my point, I want that
Man, you
thing
talk to me like this, I'm
back.
strapping that bitch to my back.
I want you to erase it in front of me. And if you don't do it, the consequences for you are going to be very stiff.
That's ridiculous. That's obnoxious.
You want to keep living here?
No, I mean, not if you're gonna be here. I mean, it's fine.
I'll figure it out.
I don't want to be recorded, man. I don't want to be recorded. If you're doing it right now, you are doing something very wrong.
Oh my God, he's trying so hard to insinuate it. Chat, I have a question for you. What is embarrassment? Embarrassment is somebody seeing your vulnerabilities outside of your control, right? That's what this guy is experiencing right now. Like, he's so angry that his vulnerabilities that he doesn't want to look at are going to be on full display, right? You're trying to avoid that at all costs by gaining control of the situation, by getting rid of the camera.
Erase.
I heard you. Stop repeating yourself.
I want proof of it.
Why would I do that? I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, Matt, then you'll suffer the consequences. You can't get favors from a family.
Exactly. You're doing me no favors. Why don't you live here? Why don't you calm down and be nice to me?
Oh, stop it. You talk like a baby.
Sounds like a baby. Wow, the insults. Ooh, he's losing tools. He's actually embarrassing himself because he has the power to stop doing what he's doing, but he won't. He's losing it. Keep recording! Keep recording, baby!
And put it on YouTube for everyone to laugh at. I didn't want that on.
For everyone to laugh at. Feeling humiliation.
Well, that was one.
Oh wait, what is this? Years ago, I made a video of him and my grandma arguing in a car. I edited out the worst parts of his screaming and driving with no hands. Everybody enjoyed it, even him, and yet he threatened to sue me for sharing it.
Well, that was one
And I believe that you and Matt came to an understanding that you wouldn't put posting. That's not posting.
No, he took pictures of me when I said no.
That's not posting.
It doesn't matter. I do not want to be taken a picture of. You don't think that that's a violation of your privacy?
You tell him that.
I told him that.
You have to calm down. I'm going to approach it a different way. I'm not involved in it. I'm not going to be involved in it. It doesn't help. There's already 1, 2.
No,
I'm not involved in it. Don't put what
I hate to say this, but you abet the problem. You abet it by doing nothing and running away from
Are you
it.
kidding me? I wasn't here.
It's so abusive.
It makes you approve of it.
Hey, I know some of you already know this, but I just have to say it. If you are dealing with somebody like this is mental abuse. Mental stress and exhaustion like this, it's painful. And this is abuse. It really is.
Don't tell him you don't approve of it.
He's not posting it on anything.
Whether he posts it or not, it has the potential if he has it. And you're walking away just like he does.
No, Greg, I'm going to get ready. You promised we would leave at 11. Let's do it.
God, if you grew up in an environment like this, I hope you use this as rocket fuel to go do really, really well out in the world and tell your family to fuck themselves.
He will erase it in front of us. We'll then ask him to do it in front of us and promise that he won't be losing it.
You can ask him to. He's a lot easier to guarantee that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How do you guarantee that when he's done it in the past?
Because he said he wouldn't do it again.
I asked him to turn it off, and he won't
How do you
do
know
it.
it was on?
He said so. He was going like this. He's making a movie of a family argument. I don't want that in my house. And I don't want him
Making a movie of a family argument? What the fuck is a family argument? What is this? Just a little family affair? This is normalized?
in here if that's the way he acts. So you go up there and get it from
Now you're barking orders to me, and it has nothing to do with your argument with that.
I mean, this is why this is becoming a problem.
Eileen, stand your ground, sister.
Well, it doesn't have to be.
We need some strength in the
Do
house.
something.
Do something.
We want to do
Stop
something.
walking away from confrontations.
Greg, it's not my confrontation. It's not my
Show me that you've got
confrontation.
the ability, or at least the strength.
Oh
and the
my
insight to
God,
go out
he's
there
trying
and
so hard to recruit her.
change that thing.
He's not, he's not.
He's trying to shame her into saying, Eileen, prove you're not weak. You go in there and do what I want you to do. Do my bidding. Prove you're not weak. Manipulation is an external force trying to force you to say bad things to yourself or make you do something that you don't want to do. The crushing pressure is, man.
Posting it anywhere. How do you know that? Because he said he wouldn't.
When did he say that?
He wouldn't post things without you.
It isn't just posting. Right. I want it deleted.
Yeah, I bet you do, little nerd.
I don't want it there.
And now it's going on my channel.
Future use. I don't want it around. Is that so hard to say? Ask. People have a right to privacy. If he's violated it, I'll sue him.
Oh yeah, it's a stop.
That's a ridiculous thing to say.
Violation of my right to privacy.
Violation of my right to privacy.
I don't know.
Your family harmony.
Go out there and get it.
It's not my iPhone to take. It's like, you're taking my iPhone.
Dude, like seriously, if you're dealing with something like this, like all this little commentary that I give, like me telling this guy to shut the fuck up, please just play that in your head. If you're feeling confused and unsure, am I doing the right thing? Am I being weak? Have I done something bad? Like, I need you to just think of my voice being like, nah, this guy needs to shut the fuck up. Like, let's set some boundaries, flip the camera on, and we'll just take a step back. This guy, okay? If you can't say it to them, I'm saying it in your head for you, okay? That guy.
Oh. You don't have to check your emails too?
Oh, Eileen, what are you talking about? Violating your privacy with an email account?
I'm just saying, calm down and get to the matter, the heart of the matter.
What's the heart of the matter?
I don't know, Greg.
Yeah, we don't know, Greg. We're all spun up now.
That's the heart of the matter.
Me?
I did not say that. I said the heart of the matter is getting along.
All right. How do you get along? Do you get along by showing people
Get a UAV in the air.
That's the way to get along?
Listen, you look outside.
Inherently provocative.
It's 11 o'clock.
Crush those dirtbags.
I want this settled before I go swim.
I'm going to go now. I'm going now. And I'm going to go by myself.
That's right. CIA nothing without us. Let's walk and do some damage.
You need to take a walk or something with Dean. When you're out of his hands. Get out of his hands.
I want to get over his girlfriend.
It's ridiculous that you
Shot
just
shooter removed.
Afraid of him showing it to his girlfriend? Oh no! Look at how far it's spread. The power of the internet. When you could have just shut the fuck up. Like, you could have just shut up.
can't get along. It's ridiculous.
You're speaking in general terms, and I'm speaking specifically. It's ridiculous the whole world
And you're,
can't
it's
get along.
ridiculous that
That's
you're yelling at
irrelevant.
me when I was in another room. This all happened.
Poor thing.
No, I'm glad I
Talk
was.
about taking painkillers or just a habit.
Oh my god, the jazz.
It is your problem. It's your son and it's your husband. Show a little responsibility.
Try to get along.
Oh,
Instead of yelling at me now.
help me out.
You're yelling at me now. And that's ridiculous.
Wow. Wow. I mean, you hear that? Just a stab right in the heart. And it's like, help me out. Help me out or I'm going to keep stabbing you. Oh my God, dude. We just saw this in the Daryl Brooks case. Exhaust, attack, exhaust, attack, exhaust, attack, exhaust, attack. Here's a lifeline. Here's what I want you to do to make it stop. Oh my God.
My dad just asked me to help him with a PowerPoint presentation. I was happy to go. He needed help rotating an image. And so no big deal. I'm happy to help. I've helped him with many things, computer things, being one of the things that he needs help with most of the time, like like most parents nowadays. But and so I show him, just how to rotate it. Right click, change size, scale, and told him to just type in 90 degrees.
I know in pauses really quick, somebody asked, how do you deal with your anger for people like this when you were raised in the same toxic environment? You have to expose yourself to it, unfortunately. And I think on a really deep level, we as humans know that we need that kind of exposure therapy like this to strengthen up. And that's why we tend to choose manipulative partners. We choose abusive partners. We choose things that replicate our past, not only because they make us more comfortable being back in that environment that we were born in, but also because we're trying to beat it all over again. As odd as it sounds, maybe even watching videos like this that scare you or that trigger you, and maybe I'm there in the video with you like you're watching now, or maybe you just watch them alone to strengthen up and teach yourself not to be as emotionally charged when these things happen. That's my 2 cents. Once again, I'm not a doctor. I am simply a YouTuber with way too many opinions.
Rotation to rotate. Pointing to him exactly where it was. And, I don't know, I guess he ignored me or something and just went ahead and did changed some other parameter to fiddle with. And I walked away to do to get back to what I was doing before. And then he yells at me.
Yeah, he's still confused and
he calls me obnoxious for going away. And this is just his personality, and I calmly mentioned to him I'd appreciate it if he didn't call me obnoxious. It was just a little nicer to me when asking for help. And when he completely denied calling me obnoxious. He said he didn't call me obnoxious. He said, that I was impossible, that I was, I don't know, just many negative things about me. And his recollection of our interaction before he started losing his temper was just not accurate. And so, and Grim Rose is the same way. She sides with him, and I thought it would be helpful to actually record our interaction so that he can't
deny what happened,
lie to himself and lie about, so that he can't lie to himself or anyone else, saying that I was the one being rude and that he wasn't. The recording would I would hope, make it impossible for him to, live in this delusion that he often
lives in. You can also see how confused this guy is and how he's trying so hard to make sense of this. And you probably also feel this if you're being gaslit, manipulated, or you're super triggered. Your brain is trying to recall everything, and it's like, how did this happen? How did I fall into this trap again? That's kind of like what I see in him right now, trying to recount it. Oh my God, the theme of the stream today are delusions. Dude, she's doing so well.
Can't tell them against my target.
He walked away 3 times. That doesn't make any sense.
It's always me.
Get us out the UAV in the air.
Wow, this guy's just so many different.
How many times have I said that? Is filming you get along? Is walking away from you get along? Why is it only my fault?
Ceasefire. Friendly target.
Get the eyes in the sky.
She's upset because you're not helping her. You're taking fast and all day.
She's doing well. He's an exhauster. He's an exhauster, folks. New term. People that just try to exhaust it till you give in.
What's the matter? Whether it's now so you're saying
I want to show you guys, hold on, sorry, I'm gonna get all psyched on you for a second, but I just want to show you guys what this leads to. Collapse and submit is the trauma response of the last resort. It can manifest as compliance/obedience. It can be treatment-resistant depression. Some people slip into a chronic depression. It can be interpersonal conflicts. It can be social avoidance, desire to isolate. You know what? I'm actually gonna put a link to this in my YouTube, like in probably like my YouTube description or something like that, if you want to read through this. But it's really, really interesting. If you're a person that was raised or was constantly exposed to an incredibly high stress environment, your response sometimes might be to collapse and submit. And you don't know why. You just, it's not exactly the same as learned helplessness. It's a little bit different, and it's very interesting. And I always encourage you guys to understand the ways that you respond to high stress so that we can reverse this. We can live a happy and fruitful life, okay? Once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm a YouTuber. All right, let's finish up this video. Shut up, Emmy.
I want to be sitting here.
So run away.
Of a family argument.
You can't run away from it. It's your family. You gotta try and give it some help. Don't you feel a responsibility there?
Your idea of helping, Greg, was by taking your side.
No.
Yes, it is.
So you think it was right for him to film?
You think it was right for him to put, God, this is so...
I'm telling you.
Shut up!
You heard it. You heard the obnoxious. You heard that.
You know what? He's not gonna shut up, so I'm gonna shut him up.
Hard point. Go time. Capture the objective. Hard point locked down. We've taken control.
In late August, a viral video made the rounds of a group of armed men breaking into an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado. It was claimed that these men were a part of the Tren de Aragua gang from Venezuela. Right-wing media in particular used this story to emphasize the danger of immigration from the southern border, as Aurora had recently seen an increase in migrants attempting to enter the United States from the south, particularly from the country of Venezuela. And now this video was being used to popularize this narrative that criminal migrants were taking over apartment complexes and terrorizing the residents. This was very quickly exploited by Donald Trump during his campaign when he would claim that Aurora had been taken over by violent gangs.
We settled beautifully into your community to prey upon innocent American citizens. That's what they're doing.
The real story isn't quite so sensational, but that's to be expected when it comes to right-wing media. Vilifying immigrants is a time-honored tradition in that space. What was more disappointing to me was watching some media outlets claiming to be on the left repeating this story without important additional context, and thereby missing an important element of the story. I imagine I have some overlap in viewers with this channel, so here's a little disclaimer before we dive in. TYT has been getting a lot of smoke from the left recently for a variety of takes, particularly when it comes to street-level crime. While it would be interesting to go over all of those and determine what sort of conservative streak may or may not be running through that network, this video isn't really about that. I wanted to focus on this story specifically because, as was seen a month later, they released a second video doubling down on their original commentary and once again carrying water for what I would ultimately learn was a cynical PR campaign. Also, as a note before we begin, since this story has had numerous developments since with lots of contradictory information coming out, I wanted to be careful to cite sources that would have been publicly available before this video was originally published on the main TYT channel. I'll be touching very briefly on those additional developments at the end of this video, but for now, I really want to focus on the video titled, Venezuelan Gang Takes Over an Apartment Complex, or Did They? Which did a terrible job of describing this story. This video was published on September 5th, 2024.
You're watching footage from last August featuring members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua breaking into an apartment unit in Aurora, Colorado.
10 seconds in, and we already have a noteworthy mistake. The men in this video, at the time of this video's upload, had not been identified. Although they would be identified a few weeks later, the police were reluctant to assign any kind of gang affiliation to them, never mind saying they were part of Tren de Aragua. Considering how this story is being used to fuel anti-immigrant rhetoric, claiming these men to be migrants, specifically criminal ones in a gang, before they have actually been identified, seems to me irresponsible. To put the issue of gangs in Aurora into a broader context, an article in the Denver Post using information from the police detailed at least 36 different gangs in Aurora, totaling 1,355 members. And based on all the articles I've read, the highest estimate I've seen for Tren de Aragua gang members in Aurora was about 15 to 20 people. But whether or not there's gang violence in Aurora isn't really the problem I have with this video. There are gangs in every big city, and some of them may include immigrants. The real problem is that there is a much deeper context that's not really being acknowledged here.
This incident has sparked a big debate and I believe some gaslighting about whether or not there is a problem with Venezuelan migrant gangs basically taking over apartment buildings or causing violent crimes at these apartment buildings.
This is where the video really starts to go off the rails. Gang violence and a gang takeover of an entire building are very different propositions, and that latter one has some important history behind it within this story. But there's another line in the video that does a better job demonstrating of what I think needs to be pushed back against in this video.
Now, a lot of people say, oh, the property owner is a bad guy. That doesn't prove anything. The property owners could be bad guys that don't take care of the rodents and the bed bugs, etc. And a Venezuelan gang might have taken over the apartments. Those two facts are not at all logically connected.
To say that reveals a complete lack of knowledge about the origin of this story. But to really understand where this story came from and why it became such high-profile news, we have to go back a little bit before this video made an appearance. Before I start the story, I do have to establish who the players are in all of this. The gang takeover narrative affects 3 different complexes that have supposedly been taken over. The first one, where that infamous video was captured, is the Edge at Lowry. The Edge at Lowry is a group of buildings but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to refer to the collective group of buildings as the Edge at Lowry. The second location is Whispering Pines, and the third is Aspen Grove, which is more commonly called Fitzsimmons Place. As you might have noticed on the map, these complexes are pretty far from one another, each several kilometers away. The fact that they're so distant raises an interesting question as to why these three in particular have supposedly been taken over. They aren't the only apartment buildings in this neighborhood, after all. One common thread is all three of these complexes are owned by a guy named Zev Baumgarten. These properties would be managed by a company called CBZ Management, which is also owned by Baumgarten. After they were purchased in the intervening years, these properties would rack up dozens of complaints that were filed with the city. It also received a number of code violations. You can read some of these historic complaints online pretty readily if you look at the Better Business Bureau's website for CBZ Management. The state of disrepair and disregard for properties seems to be pretty common for any building managed by this company. Complaints include broken appliances, bug and rodent infestations, and questionable charges costing tenants hundreds and, in some cases, thousands of dollars. It presents the impression that these properties were managed with minimal to no services. These issues persisted for years, well before the arrival of a large number of migrants in December of 2022. That arrival, by the way, was part of Texas Governor Greg Abbott's project to bus various people who had crossed the border to other states. The total number of newcomers to the Denver area was just under 43,000 as of October of 2024, and it's estimated that half of these people have relocated to other parts of the country, either for better opportunities or to be with family members. These people are often labeled as Venezuelan. This isn't entirely accurate. Venezuelans make up just over a third of this population. The next most common group are Colombians and Mexicans, but being the largest demographic within the group, typically they are just stereotyped as Venezuelans. As the code violations and tenant complaints piled up, eventually the city of Aurora decided to step in regarding these three properties. They planned to first shut down Fitzsimmons Place in mid-August, and then Whispering Pines and the Edge of Lowry in the following weeks. Baumgarten was facing 81 charges and was scheduled to appear for a trial on August 27th, and then again on September 5th for another 2 dozen charges related to vehicles. All of these were for just one of the buildings, Fitzsimmons Place. With the building set to be closed by the city in 2 weeks, Baumgarten began to fight back by claiming in the media that the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua had taken over his properties and were preventing his team from performing regular maintenance at the building. This is where the gang narrative takeover first entered the media cycle. And to highlight just how that entered the media cycle, we can look at an article from the outlet Westward, which referenced an August 5th statement regarding a gang takeover from CBZ Management that came through a Florida-based PR firm, Red Banyan. A quick look at the PR company shows us that they specialize in helping repair the reputation of people and businesses damaged by scandals, and they hype up their ability to place stories within the media. It does seem a bit strange that the property owner was complaining about not being able to afford to make repairs, but he somehow had all this money to hire a PR firm. As I pointed out earlier, these apartments were a complete mess before the arrival of any of these migrants, and the timing of these claims really gives the game away. If a Venezuelan gang was somehow preventing these apartments from receiving regular maintenance, it's a wonder that they were able to do this for years before any Venezuelan migration wave came in at all. As an interesting point of comparison, Baumgarten owns several other buildings in Denver, buildings, you won't be shocked to learn, that also have numerous health and safety violations. One of the residents of one of the Denver properties discussed the poor living conditions, saying, "What's going on in Aurora, that's essentially what's happening to their properties in Denver. It just hasn't gotten the same attention." By the way, this comment does come from a mid-September article, so I won't blame QIT for not being aware of something that hadn't been published yet. Though all the other details I've shared so far were readily available throughout articles published in August. One of the major differences between the three buildings in Aurora and the other buildings in Denver, all in similar states of disrepair, was that in Denver, the city had not stepped in to shut these buildings down. And that might be a reason why there are no news stories about a Venezuelan gang seizing control of them. Baumgarten told this gang takeover story to his lenders, which is how they decided to create a report. Let's go back to the TYT video for that.
Now, the video that we showed you earlier was taken later in August. So even before that incident occurred, there were already concerns about gang violence. There was already a law firm investigating it on behalf of the lender.
The first major issue with this report is that it's specifically about Whispering Pines, not the edge at Lowry, which is where the viral video comes from. The video really conflates those two properties in an unhelpful way, including mistakenly listing one of the residents from the edge at Lowry as being from Whispering Pines, and I think it demonstrates a general lack of familiarity with many of the elements of this story. But to look at the details of the report itself, it was put together by the law firm Perkins Coie, probably said that wrong. Considering the dates used, we can infer that the report was put together no earlier than the first week of July. It's very clear that crimes have taken place, but it's difficult to parse from this report alone which ones were dealt with by police and which weren't, and which ones can be substantiated at all. Looking at the more obvious crimes, there was a case of assault in November 2023, but is followed by this interesting one. We have no information on what investigative steps were launched or arrests were made in connection with this violent and unprovoked attack. It seems like something they might have wanted to reach out to the police about, but for some reason they didn't. There are much wilder claims as well, such as child trafficking, but there's no direct evidence of that. The property manager from Whispering Pines says they were told that by a gang member, but that's not really the same as interviewing the gang member. And it's also weird that a gang member would openly discuss their child trafficking plans with the property manager. But that's kind of the whole point of this report. It's not meant to be a listing of definite crimes that have happened that the police have ignored. Rather, it's something presented by a law firm asking the police to look into this without actually figuring out if the police have started looking into this or not. But the TYT video makes a much bolder claim about the validity of this report.
And the report was further confirmed by the Aurora Police Department, which is now denying that there's a problem of Venezuelan gang violence at this apartment complex.
The cops did not confirm the details of this report. The confirmation that's described in this video was actually done by local news, who had requested police reports from around the same time, specifically the report of a housekeeper being threatened. The most contentious claim from this report is about rent collection or extortion, and that's mentioned in the video like this.
The property has recorded footage of gang members knocking on doors without authorization or without any justification, attempting to collect rent from the tenants of Whispering Pines.
Even several weeks after this video has first went up, there is still no firm evidence that to any sort of large scale that this is happening. In this video, the only evidence that's really cited comes from the report. When looking at the report, the only real evidence provided is a story from the property manager and a single image of rent supposedly being collected. The law firm, I guess, might have seen more evidence than that, but none of it made it into the report. One thing that is worth noting, though, is that the man who the property manager consistently identifies as Larry is almost certainly a man named Larry who was arrested by Aurora police back in July. He has so far only been charged with menacing or threatening to kill someone with a gun. This news did come out a few days after the first TYT video, so it's understandable why they didn't know this at the time. But considering this report doesn't actually concern specific police actions that were or were not taken, I'm not sure why they were just so willing to go along with the narrative that this gang was currently controlling the apartment complex and extorting rent from people. The whole rent collection narrative never rang true to me because multiple tenants interviewed in these complexes repeatedly said that they were not paying rent to gang members. The allegations made in the report were a bit of an outlier, and I couldn't quite make sense of it other than my assumption that the report just was not providing full enough information. I believe this hypothesis was confirmed in a November article on the Denver Post. I'll read you an excerpt. "Rent was not collected by gangs," said Chamberlain, the current police chief, last week. Tenants told police that some people would bang on their doors and wouldn't leave until the occupant gave them $20, he said. Well, I guess it's possible these people are lying. I think it's more than likely that small sums of money were shaken down by these people by criminals, and that was construed to be some kind of rent collection operation. And I don't want to downplay that someone stealing $20 from you when you're low income can be a real blow, but it does not confirm the whole gang takeover rent collection operation that was being furthered by a property owner who needed some kind of diversion to hide the fact that he had let his property fall into people's Also, one last note about that report. The law firm claims it was conducting it on behest of the bank that had lent the money to the property owners. Well, that same bank would then turn around and sue the property owners, so perhaps they were not entirely convinced of the gang takeover either. The second video that came out in October would repeat this claim that whether it was a few units or an entire apartment is an important distinction to be made, but that is very much at the heart of this.
Whether they had been taken over in full or partially, wherever you want to land on that, okay? Whatever makes you feel better.
I'm not even convinced that a few units were taken over, but the whole point of this narrative is that the owner of this property is trying to claim that the entire building has been taken over and he's not able to collect rent from anybody. The local outlet, Denverite, took a closer look at the arrest records of the alleged Tren de Aragua members to provide further details, and only one of those arrests seemed to support the takeover narrative. The man was arrested for entering the apartment of two other residents at the edge at Lowry and threatened them with a gun. He apparently told the couple to get out and then let 5 men in, and there was a comment about how they run this place, although he used a word I probably shouldn't have commented, and this man was arrested. Although an interesting detail about the couple is that one of them was also alleged to be a member of Tren de Aragua, and he was also arrested because of charges from a separate incident involving one of his former roommates, who he assaulted after refusing to pay his share of the rent at a different location. I genuinely tried really hard to find any evidence of gang takeovers, and honestly, this one case is the best I could find. And this was published well after that first TYT video came up. A single unit that was taken over with the perpetrator arrested by police. Now, I haven't inspected all these units myself, and I suppose there are crimes out there that may have been committed that no one has come forward and provided any firm evidence of, but at the very least, I feel very confident in saying that the property owner's story of several buildings being under the control of gangs is, at the very least, a gross exaggeration. Looking through these arrests, one other interesting detail is that for the November 2023 assault at Whispering Pines, the victim was identified as none other than Zev Baumgarten, the property owner who has neglected these buildings. I should make it explicitly clear that obviously this is not okay. Even though he's been absolutely atrocious to his tenants, that doesn't justify some guys beating the crap out of him. There was a man who was arrested for this assault, and he was identified as potentially being a member of Tren de Aragua. Baumgarten pretty much never does interviews, so we can really only speculate what this assault has done to his perception of what's going on in those buildings, but it is quite possible that the experience colored his perspective somewhat. And I should restate, regardless of any sort of assault, his negligence towards the property, including allowing conditions that increased the incidence of crime there, go back well before the Venezuelan people moved into those buildings. The Young Turks video spends surprisingly little time talking about Baumgarten, but they did have another group they dedicated minutes of their time to complaining about.
For the lefties who are watching this, who are concerned, oh my God, please, please, please don't report the truth because it's going to paint migrants in a negative light. The migrants are the ones who are victimized by this. So if you care about migrants, if you care about immigrants, you should not want them to live under these conditions.
If you're pushing back against the demagoguing of immigrants, I just did that. That's how you do that, okay? But if you say, in order to push back against that, I'm just going to pretend that no immigrant has ever committed a crime and that those gangs aren't here and they haven't taken over anything, you sound ridiculous.
Hearing stuff like this makes me wonder what portion of this video comes out of concern for the residents and what portion is being created to push back against annoying people on the left. I'm not saying it has to be one or the other, but it seems like a bit of both are clearly at play here. As someone who is annoyed by people on the left, I understand that impulse. And hey, sometimes it's important to push back against annoying figures who are making it tougher to operate in that space. But when it comes to genuine concern over these residents and how they're being victimized, I've already described a lot of context that was left out of that story. And more importantly, there was no mention whatsoever of what was going on in Fitzsimmons Place, the third property taken over by a violent Venezuelan gang. If you truly care about the residents in these complexes, I don't know how the story of Fitzsimmons Place can be ignored. So let's go into some detail about that. Fitzsimmons Place was declared a nuisance attracting criminal activity by the city in September of 2023. The city described how crime at the property had gone up 30% since 2019 when it was purchased by Baumgarten. One interesting fact about the nuisance notice is that it has a list of the many crimes that took place at this property in the preceding 12 months, including several before the arrival of any Venezuelan migrants to Aurora. And all of these crimes were before the supposed gang takeover began. The city would insist that crime is not the reason this building will eventually be shut down, but this notice does serve as firm documentation that this has been a long-standing problem at the property and isn't the product of recent immigration. And I really shouldn't have to say this, but if you're claiming that your story is about the crime affecting these people and the only criminals you seem to be talking about are the Venezuelan immigrants, you have more in common with the right-wing media when covering this story than you realize. By mid-August, before the viral video went live, Fitzsimmons Place would be shut down, leaving nearly 200 people without a home.
She says for the past 3 months, she's always paid her rent on time, but has had continuing issues with lighting in the kitchen and issues with the front door and pest control problems. Also, half the month of August nearly gone. Doesn't give her family much time to find permanent housing moving forward.
Listening to the stories of these residents, it's really heartbreaking. They were paying $1,600 a month to live in apartments that had serious problems. Speaking to CBS News, one former resident said,
Fuck, what town is that in?
Hot water is turned off every week. We have to boil water to take a warm shower, and there's a lot of breath.
Although many of the residents describe the lack of safety in the community, it's very tough to find anyone supporting the gang narrative presented by the property manager. In fact, following the evictions, the former residents of Fitzsimmons Place filed a class action lawsuit against Zev Baumgarten and his business partner. Notably, it's not the city they were going after or the police department. They blame the property owner for the problems in their building. A civil rights attorney spoke to local news about the issue.
They didn't have any excuse until it was leaked that Aurora was going to be condemning this building. Only just about 2 weeks ago did the Baumgartens and their companies hire a public relations firm to start pushing this narrative that the building was taken over by gangs, and for that reason they had to cease property management operations. But the reality is they had ceased operations long before this news leaked that Aurora was going to be condemning the building.
By the time the viral video came out, Fitzsimmons Place was already old news, and it's hard to say a gang has taken over a building that has been completely shut down. But realize when people are talking about apartment buildings that have been taken over by gangs, of the 3 of them, 1 of them isn't even open anymore. But while we're on the topic of Fitzsimmons Place, those 81 charges I mentioned against Baumgarten from the city were conditionally dismissed. Baumgarten waived the right to a speedy trial and must now reimburse the city up to $60,000 to secure the property. He then either has to sell or lease the property to a new owner, or bring the building back up to code to resolve the many issues it's facing. This needs to be completed in the next 6 months. Although the delay in the trial must be some kind of relief to Baumgarten, it seems strange to me to take that agreement because it seemed like the perfect time to present all the evidence of a gang having taken over a property because of the city's negligence. But instead, he is spending a significant amount of money to secure the building, possibly even more if he decides to bring it up to code, or he'll have to sell the property. If this deal seems a little too generous for the guy, well, I'll have a little more on that later. There is one section of the video that does come close to understanding what might be happening here.
Some of them are saying, no, the gang violence isn't the problem. The real problem is the landlord. But both things can be true, guys. The landlord being neglectful and not taking care of the building could actually attract more crime. That usually happens when gangs or criminals see a building kind of falling apart. They see it as an opportunity to come in and take over. And so I don't see that as
rhetoric has gotten so
other. It could totally be both.
Easy. What the hell
What bothers me in this video is that it really dismisses the claims of many of the tenants that are trying to highlight how the property owner has completely abandoned them. The tenants are trying to get people to understand that this isn't a story about crime, or at least it's not a story specifically about gang crime. And the reason that this story made it into the headlines isn't because gang violence is out of control in these buildings. It's because gang violence is being tied to an immigrant community so a property owner can scapegoat them to hide his own negligence. And that's the frustration being created in this video. Instead of focusing on the bigger problem making the lives of these tenants miserable, attention is instead being redirected to the more salacious story of a Venezuelan gang. That's probably why the tenants have been vocal after the fact, trying to change that
Her
narrative.
hair gets blonder and blonder.
She's of these buildings.
She's trying to get a job on Fox,
Cindy
chick.
Romero in the TYT video. Honestly, I'm not too interested in digging into the details of this lady because she's a private citizen. But what's more important than this specific tenant is the context in which she's being presented to us. And to understand why she's being presented to us in a specific context, we have to talk about a certain Aurora City Council member named Danielle Jurinsky. Although she isn't mentioned until late in the TYT video, she does make an uncredited cameo early on.
The governor, Jared Polis, claims that the allegations are a figment of your imagination.
This is so wrong, I'm tempted to call it a lie. Although it could just be that no one really bothered to look up where this imagination comment comes from. Let's look at the full context of the closure, though. This actually doesn't come from the governor, by the way. It comes from one of his spokespeople. According to police intelligence, this purported invasion is largely a feature of Daniel Jurinsky's imagination. That kind of changes everything, huh? He's not talking about everyone. He means the aforementioned council member Jurinsky. She is described later in the TYT video like this.
Some streamers have decided to smear the city council member who helped this woman, who's low income, move out of her home into a safe place to live. And they smear her, the city council member, as racist because she is concerned about this crime that's going on. Okay.
Although I can't be an expert on Danielle Jurinsky, I can give you a bit of background on her that will help clarify where she's coming from. On July 28th, there was a massive gathering of about 3,000 to 4,000 people in a shopping center parking lot where these individuals had gathered to hear about the presidential elections in Venezuela, many of them naturally being Venezuelans eager for news about their home country. The gathering alarmed some residents, and rumors began swirling on social media. One of the loudest voices was Aurora City Councilor Danielle Jurinsky. Jurinsky had already been vocal in the past about her displeasure for the influx of new arrivals south of the border. She is very much an anti-immigration city councilor. Her post on Facebook regarding this gathering was far more heated, though. In part, it read, "Thousands of these folks took over and completely shut down a part of our city. The police were totally overrun and were forced to get out of the area for their safety. A police car was shot up. This is the United States of America. This is your city. Please, please spread the word. This November's election may, in fact, be the actual most important of your lives, your children's lives, your grandchildren's lives." The Venezuelans were not, in fact, taking over the city. And after the results of the Venezuelan election came in, they pretty much went home. Police would later clarify that while a gun was fired into the air at some point, a police car was not shot up. They also described how police were there for the entire event and didn't make any arrests, and that there were no reports about rioting or people being attacked or businesses being damaged. To be fair, there was a lot of trash left behind, and while that is a shame to see, it's also something you'd find after a music festival or a large gathering of people. But Jurinsky's comments weren't about littering. They were about a Venezuelan gang taking over Aurora. Jurinsky would later claim that this gathering was organized by Tren de Aragua and that it was some kind of test that they were running. This is the imagination at work in this story. It seems as though her attitudes towards immigrants and this apartment complex takeover were a perfect fit. Jurinsky did not enter to this controversy after helping Cindy Romero move, though. In fact, she very clearly went on record about it at least a week prior to that viral video being shot. Around the time of the gang takeover narrative first appearing in local news back in August, Danielle Jurinsky, along with counselors Stephanie Hancock and Stephen Sundberg, also started speaking out for the property management company during a public safety committee at this time. They claimed there was a big gang problem in the city, and they didn't believe Fitzsimmons Place was being shut down because of code violations. Here's some footage from that meeting.
What we believe, our opinions are not up for debate. This is our beliefs. The three of us believe there is a gang problem, a huge gang problem. That apartment complexes and areas of our city are being taken over. This is what we believe.
There was another part of this meeting where Jurinsky mentions the property manager for Fitzsimmons Place was physically attacked at the end of 2023.
And then their property manager was beaten so badly he was hospitalized last November, Mayor, and APD is aware of this.
It's interesting that Jurinsky mentioned this particular assault because it was detailed in that report I mentioned earlier that was sent to the city on August 9th that supposedly details how gangs had taken over properties managed by CBZ. This video was uploaded on August 8th. the day before that letter actually arrived to City Hall. So it suggests to some degree that Jurinski has been in communication with either CBZ management or the law firm conducting the investigation. Do you remember that settlement that pushed back Baumgarten's trial? The one over Fitzsimmons Place where he's spending 60 grand and might have to sell the property? An interesting detail there is that if you look up the actual agreement, you can see that it was negotiated with a city council member, Danielle Jurinski. So apparently in some capacity, Jurinski was involved in hashing out this deal that created the possibility for Baumgarten to hold on to his property. Just another interesting connection between the two. I suppose she could have been representing the city, although I suspect the city manager was doing that, and considering a few days before this agreement was reached, she didn't believe that code violations were the reasons this building was shut down. So I suspect she wasn't exactly holding Baumgarten's feet to the fire on this one. And of course, all of this was happening before that viral video went live, and Jurinski presented herself as some kind of savior stepping in to rescue a tenant. Jurinski has affixed herself to Romero and is frequently sharing the tenant's story. In one more recent case, she was literally coaching her on stage while she was speaking at a Trump rally.
The loud music, the destruction, the gunshots.
The PR company Red Banyan also has a history of using politicians for its messaging, specifically when it comes to this gang takeover story. Going back to when it first broke in early August, Republican congressional candidate John Fabricatori was identified by that PR firm looking for the property owner as someone who was a representative for CBZ Property Management. A quote from a 9 News article reads, Fabricatori said the city didn't want to arrest illegal aliens because of bad optics, and he said the property owner had invested in improving the building. Now, I'm not saying anyone is on the payroll for one company or another, but I think there is a confluence of interests going on here. We have a property owner creating a gang narrative in an attempt to deflect responsibility for his own negligence towards his properties, and a politician advancing their own career using anti-immigrant rhetoric. So we have two very self-interested parties using this story to advance their own careers, something that is completely missing from that TYT video. To be as fair as possible, there is a decent amount of pushback that comes from the TYT video regarding how immigrants are being demonized by the right.
And overall, when you look at the crime rates, we've been over this many, many times. I hate to break it to you guys, but native-born Americans, twice as violent, twice as many crimes as undocumented immigrants, and 4 times as many crimes as documented immigrants.
And that's great. I'm glad they did that. But this pushback is incomplete when they also don't show how the property owner is complicit in all of this and also provide cover for some of the conservative politicians who are exploiting this crisis and presenting city council member like Jurinski as someone who simply wanted to help her constituents. A little over a month later, on October 15th, the Young Turks uploaded a second video on the subject titled J.D. Vance Interview Gets Pants Over Venezuelan Gangs. And this was not a great video.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs?
Fast forward to this past weekend.
Vice President-elect, everybody.
The Raditz say, no, it wasn't a big deal. It was limited to a handful of apartment complexes.
This is a strange week.
Whoa. Is Anna Kasparian really going to bat for JD fucking Vance? Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Congratulations, TYT. Trump won. Y'all are about to pop up. You are all, you will be forced by, on many levels,
RCXD in your AO.
to lurch to the left. I'm sorry, to the right. And not just lurch. At this point, you probably start picking up the pace. You're gonna do a light jog. How far to the right? As far as you can go, as long as Ash is certain power. Straight up. I can't believe she went to bat for JD Vance. That dude's a psychopath. blows up the entire cabinet.
Establishing SAM turret.
It's worse than fascist. I'll just
reading of the words that were said, Martha Raddatz is not explicitly confirming gang takeovers in apartment buildings. She tried to clarify that there have been gang-related problems, but then she is misconstrued by J.D. Vance, someone who has, by the way, gone on record as having manufactured stories to spread anti-immigrant rhetoric.
I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it.
This is one of these moments that just seems like a breakdown in understanding what words mean. Saying something is a problem doesn't mean confirming how that problem is construed by the other party. Even if Martha Raddatz completely agreed with J.D. Vance here, is that really the extent to which a story can be confirmed now? A comment from a moderator? I'm not even really sure what to push back against here because there's no real substance. Yet it's being treated by this video as some kind of grand vindication. I know this is a common talking point that's been circulated in right-wing media, but it's obviously been exaggerated.
The Aurora Police Department put out a press release about the Venezuelan gang members that they had identified and arrested.
When you look at the details of these 10 men who have been arrested, they don't really speak to any sort of extortion scheme or apartment takeover narrative. Many of the charges involve things like domestic violence, and several men were arrested over one specific shooting. There was a fight that broke out at a party, and there was an instance of one gang member breaking into the apartment that was occupied by a different gang member. While it's certainly conceivable that some residents at these apartments have been shaken down for money or robbed at some point, a robber might have even said they were calling it rent for living there. This is me being incredibly charitable, as it's hard to find firm evidence of any of that having happened, and certainly not to the extent at which it is being alleged by the property owner. In fact, the original video claiming the poor living conditions and violence had nothing to do with one another was part of the problem. And much like the original video, a huge portion of this video is designed to attack the left.
And I love how easily they just dismiss it like it's no big deal. Do we care about people or not? Do we care about people living in poverty or not?
Then the extreme left goes, aha! It's actually the landlord, and there's no Venezuelan gangs at all. Everybody's fine. No apartments were taken over, and we live in Shangri-La. And when the leftists see this picture, they think they don't exist.
I don't understand why this is part of the story. It just reads incredibly petty and meaningless to engage in this sort of thing. But as someone who considers himself to be on the left, I do feel like I need to respond to this. I'd point out that there are a lot of great leftists doing important work, specifically when it comes to this story. There was one underreported one I really wanted to share, and to be honest, it's a huge part of why I wanted to make this video, because this is something that was not widely reported, even in local media. This comes from an article in Denverite, which provided a lot of personal stories of many of the people who were living in Fitzsimmons Place, and how they were struggling to find rooms in hotels after their building was shut down. One way in which the city, I think, is to blame for what's going on is how quickly they shut down Fitzsimmons Place. Although there had been a lot of talk of it being shut down, the actual deadline to shut the whole place down was only a few weeks, and a lot of residents simply didn't have the time to find new accommodations. The city, for its part, offered to pay for hotel rooms for a couple of weeks, but residents were pretty much left on their own to figure out what was going on. Much of the work of helping these people fell on volunteers from groups such as East Colfax Community Collective and House Youth Action Network Denver. The article describes them as a group of anarchists, socialists, students, and neighborhood organizers who help people get water, food, and arrange for their accommodations, making sure they had appropriate transportation and rooms booked so these families wouldn't be left on the street. As a quick aside, I talk a lot about leftist politics on this channel, and I see a lot of questions about how people can make a difference in their community. And if you're someone who wants to make a positive difference in your community and you're not sure where to start, look for organizations like these. They provide community support to people in really tough moments of their life. And it's really so easy sometimes to make a positive difference. In this case, it was just showing up with some food and water and helping people get from point A to point B. And while there are annoying leftists on the internet who will say all sorts of obnoxious things, I think the contributions of leftists in communities often gets ignored and minimized. They're out there doing the actual work. And to me, this is what I think of when I think of leftist activism. This article is an important read as it puts a human face on all of the people, particularly those who were affected by this building that was left in disrepair and then was suddenly shut down. And it also describes how stories of rampant gang violence is stereotyping an entire community. To be a Venezuelan person in Aurora right now is to be associated with the existence of this gang, a gang that is incredibly small and has limited to no influence in the city. As an update, on the other two buildings that were scheduled to be shut down, Whispering Pines and one of the buildings at the edge of Lowry are luckily staying open, and hundreds of more people won't be forced out of their homes. Even better, a court-appointed third party has taken control of these properties and will begin making long-needed repairs, something that should have been done for Fitzsimmons Place rather than having all the tenants be evicted. At least for the residents of two of the properties, there is some degree of justice. To clarify this just a little bit, the court-appointing third party isn't part of any kind of settlement with the city, who had been threatening to shut the places down. Rather, this is because the owner defaulted on millions of dollars in loans and were sued by the U.S. Bank Trust Company, and the buildings are now in receivership. Also, I want to point out that the bank suing the property owner is the same bank that had that report commissioned about the supposed takeover of Whispering Pines. I want to include some additional context specifically regarding Fitzsimmons Place that has recently come out regarding when it was labeled a public nuisance in September 2023. In documents that were uncovered by 9 News, a report from a police officer and several communications with city officials show them repeatedly warning the property owners of the growing problem with crime as a result of the poor conditions the building was left in. Numerous recommendations were made to improve safety within the building that simply weren't followed through with. Police even made the offer of helping with security, but there's no evidence that they were ever taken up on that offer. I'm sure to some degree police could have done a better job of providing safety for any of the people there. After all, several tenants had reported very slow responses to 911 calls. What these documents do reflect is how the property owners were very much informed on the growing issues within their building and were repeatedly offered solutions and services to help deal with it, and then they seemingly did nothing to address those issues. The documents also make mention of an unnamed gang having a presence in that building, though there is no mention of any sort of elaborate rent extortion plan. The closest they get to that is that apparently after a shooting in October of 2023, threats were made to some residents not to speak to the police about it. And to reiterate, this report only covers Fitzsimmons Place, which was closed in mid-August. I do have one more update about Zev Baumgarten, and this is kind of an odd development. The guy was scheduled to appear in court on October 24th, but apparently the city hasn't been able to find him. Several summons were sent to the addresses registered to him, but they all came back saying that the addresses were not found. They tried sending the summons to his lawyer, but got no response. If anyone knows this guy, they may want to let him know that the city of Aurora is looking for him, and he has to appear in court soon. This video was not very fun to make, and it really seems like a piece of bait that was designed for media outlets to further the interests of conservative politicians and a property owner. While I don't think we should never talk about it, period, or pretend like gang violence isn't happening, not providing that additional context, I think, allows stories like these to perpetuate. Another thing that really annoys me in these videos is the ridiculous disparity in power between the two groups being complained about. Even taking the video at face value and pretending it's not leaving out important context that would dramatically change people's understanding of the story. You have, on the one hand, the voices on the right, which include Donald Trump and various high-ranking Republican officials who are in the middle of a political campaign to take control of the federal government. On the other hand, representing the left, you have some online leftists. After looking at all of the context of this story, it very clearly appears to me to be bait, specifically to get people talking about the danger of immigrants. That's not to say that crime hasn't happened in this location. There are countless areas in the United States where crime happens, including apartment buildings. And some of those crimes involve gangs. And some of those crimes involve gangs that have immigrants. In that respect, there's nothing particularly special or interesting about this story. And it was very, and obviously seated by the property owner to deflect from his own responsibility, and is obviously being taken advantage of by political parties trying to advance their interests ahead of an election. By not pointing out that context, these videos fall for the trap and swallow the bait whole. Yeah, they say that Donald Trump shouldn't be such a racist, but they're still covering the story as if it's anything other than anti-immigrant bait. Originally, this video was actually going to be about the Aurora complex story more broadly, using the TYT video as a jumping off point. But I decided to refocus this as a response video because information kept coming out regarding the apartment complexes. And rather than spend however long I would need to go over each new piece of information and how it's poorly sourced or misleading because...
Russell Brand says there are dangerous signals out there that we need to be protected from.
Hello, I'm just back from Narnia, where I had a holiday, Mr. Tumnus, Aslan, all those guys. And as you know, airports are places full of Wi-Fi and all sorts of evil energies. Think of all the phones out there, all of the signals, corruptible and corrupting. Luckily, I wear this magical amulet from AirTech that keeps me safe from all of the various signals out there.
So the tinfoil hat's not going to be enough. What am I going to do with this now? Hello, lovely people. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new. My name is Emma. I miss the good old days when a tinfoil hat was enough to keep you safe from all of the deadly signals here and there. So that was indeed Russell Brand. You know, this advert makes me kind of sad because it reminds me that I really did like Russell Brand. It might be if you weren't familiar with him as a general comedian in his early days, you might find this difficult to understand. If you've only known Russell Brand since he's gone right-wing conspiracy theorist, it might be weird. Russell Brand was always a very anti-establishment, lefty, liberal, kind of a bit edgy, but kind of a troll for the people. And you can tell that he's kind of maintained that in his core, but he's taken a lot of drugs, and now the things that he's fighting for, the alt-right Christian, American Christian nationalist pipeline somehow has found him a vulnerable person to take, and now he is spreading this bullshit to all of us. But it's sad because when he was this kind of whimsical comedian, Narnia, all that stuff, you know, the signals, look, it's making me stronger. When he was, you know, exercising that kind of personality for the sake of good and to sort of help people and not to sell scammy EMF protection products, that was cool. I liked him. Anyway, we're here to talk about AirTech today and generally EMF protection, not Russell Brand specifically. It just came up because he is advertising this magic amulet. This is super interesting for me. I feel like I have a great view and insight into the cyclical nature of conspiracy theories regarding technology, because when I was a child and my dad was a big conspiracy theorist, one of the things that was going around all of the conspiracy theorist lectures that he watched and the radio shows that he listened to, and something that he was very afraid of was radio signals. At that point, it was radio towers that was the big frightening thing. It was radio waves that were controlling people's moods. He thought that overhead wires and the signals, the electrical signals that passed through them, were responsible for a sharp uptick in bird deaths. So this is just kind of the latest development. The latest hot thing, obviously, is 5G. Just before that, it was sort of Wi-Fi and wireless. As Russell Brand mentioned it, clearly that is still a concern. It's EMF, right, that people are afraid of, electromagnetic fuckery. I think it's frequencies. It's electromagnetic field. We live in a world now where, thanks to the internet, any old bullshit pseudoscience scam can get huge exposure. They can find some grifter with a podcast like Russell Brand to do a sponsorship deal with them and then terrify everyone into thinking they need these stupid, pointless, expensive products. You might have seen going around on Amazon a while ago. Allegedly, they're still selling them. In fact, I have a BBC article about it. Here you go. Anti-radiation phone stickers still sold on Amazon. They are literally, usually they're gold. They are literally little stickers that you put on the back of your phone, and that protects you from the signals put out by your phone. The listings remain 8 months after scientists told the BBC the smart dot stickers had no effects, obviously. Here's the thing, right? Radiation is a very frightening word because most people hear radiation and think atom bomb. I'll share this Verge article with you. It's got some great quotes from various people who have written on the subject. A professor at the University of Pennsylvania who's been studying radiation's impact on humans since 1976, Kenneth Foster, says radiation has characteristics that increase people's sense of risk. You can't see it. You can't know that it's there. That makes it more frightening. It's the same reason I get that slight, paranoid sort of uptick in energy if I think I smell something that smells like gas. People hear radiation, they tend to think ionizing radiation without making the distinction between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation is the radiation that can be harmful. That's what you get from X-rays and such, which incidentally we do also use for X-rays and such. And we have means of protecting ourselves from those things. We limit our exposure as much as we can. What I'm trying to get at here is that if occasionally exposing ourselves intentionally to ionizing radiation is okay for our health, being exposed to really low levels of non-ionizing radiation, probably also fine. That's not going to be a comfort enough for everyone. I understand, it's fine. Obviously, the radiation that comes from mobile phones and things is non-ionizing, just to clarify, in case that wasn't clear. This is a point that I wanted to make that is phrased so beautifully. I'm going to just take it from Timothy Jorgensen in his book, Strange Glow, The Story of Radiation. He calls cell phone scares an epidemic without a disease. And he says, if cell phones are truly killing us with brain cancer, we have to ask, where are the bodies? We have had mobile phones in our lives long enough that tumors and cancers would have developed. We would see the effects. I'll share with you this study down below as well. We have over 70 years of research in the field of electromagnetic fields and radiation. The World Health Organization has concluded that scientific knowledge in this area is now more extensive than for most chemicals, and the current evidence does not confirm the existence of any health consequences from exposure to low-level electromagnetic fields. Hello, lovely people. If I may steal you from the video for just a minute, I want to give you an update. A few videos ago, I introduced you to Bono, the giving platform. If you missed it, Bono is a really easy way to donate to causes that you care about. It's super user-friendly. It makes your tax life much easier, but more importantly, it's super discerning about the impact of the charities that it chooses, and it's really transparent about the impact that we have. You get a regular weekly breakdown of your impact so far. You also get a yearly projection. That's what I want to share with you right now. Together, thanks to everyone who signed up via my link, this year we will fund 20 crisis counseling calls with teens via the Trevor Project. A huge part of what the Trevor Project does is make mental health support for LGBTQ plus teens accessible in a safe way. So what our donations are doing is funding training for crisis counselors that speak to young people who need support with issues like coming out, their identity, depression, etc. Through the mental health cause, we will fund 12 peer support groups through NAMI. They host these peer support groups all over the US, both for people struggling with their mental health and for caregivers. Just from some of you guys signing up from one video, that's such an amazing impact. I'm so excited to keep this going. The holidays are coming up. It is the season of giving. I know most of you will want to give in some way. You will be planning to donate. Bono makes it super easy for you. The charities they support are so good, and you can also join our little community and share in the impact together. I also want to give a special shout out to Misty, Raymond, Steve, and Mark. Thank you so much for your support, guys. It really means everything. The holiday season is one of the most wonderful times of giving. It is also one of the most difficult times for a lot of LGBTQ people, for a lot of people struggling with their mental health. It can be really difficult, so this is an amazing time to support as much as we can. Thank you so much once again. I am so proud and encouraged and emotional at what a wonderful community we really have here. Do check it out. Thank you so much. Back to the video. Here is the AirsTech website, which, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, looks scammy to me just from the outset. Oh, it's new tech season, so there's a sale on. How lucky. Russell Brand also has a dedicated page on here. Trusted by biohacker Ben Greenfield. Wow. Trusted by experts. Very specific experts. And we'll have a look at their peer-reviewed papers in a little bit and talk about those briefly. Integrative health practitioner Alyssa Lascala says that this is good. Here's the Lifetune Flex, the magic amulet that Russell Brand was wearing. $240. You've got your classic Lifetune 1 sticker, the same as the stickers. I'm sure they'll argue that it's different, but it's the same thing as the stickers, the EMF protective stickers that go on your phone. $89.95. Let's think about this for a second. An EMF protective sticker on your phone, a sticker that blocks the electromagnetic field. Surely that would only block the radiation on the one point that the sticker is touching. I actually read an article. I'll try and find it for you and drop it down below. It might be one of the ones that I'm already linking, but I read one that pointed out that actually using any kind of sticker or device on your phone that is intended to block signals, you know, or dampen signals that your phone sends out can actually make the potential problem worse because your phone won't work properly, so it'll be trying to compensate. The only way to block all of the signals from your phone is to put it in a Faraday cage. It's amazing to me that these websites don't sell, you keep your electronic devices all in their own little Faraday cage and you only get them out when you have to make a phone call and then put it away quickly, and it's so stupid. These area defense things where it's this hideous little magic 8-ball thing that just goes in a little block of wood, and that's supposed to protect your area for a certain distance. $259.99. Unbelievable. The idea that wearing a little amulet can protect, it just doesn't make sense. Because here's the thing. If it really worked, if putting a sticker on your phone really blocked the signals, your phone wouldn't work. The reason people are afraid of this mobile phone technology, blah, 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 is because that's the technology that makes the phone work. Essentially what this is hoping to achieve, sort of claiming to achieve signal blocking wise, is the same as turning off your phone, but for $89.95. Ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. And the main thing is, yeah, the proof is in the pudding, right? We have had mobile phones and EMF, non-ionizing radiation, for long enough that we would have developed the tumors and the cancers that the conspiracy theorists are trying to frighten people over. We would have developed them by now. We would have the bodies. The proof is in the pudding. We're fine. Over 70 years of research into this field, more study than has gone into many other things. But people, companies, unethical poo heads can make money off of this fear. And because most people aren't educated into things like different types of radiation unless you go into that, you know, particular field. I had to read about it and find lots of different sources that helped me as a layman vaguely understand what I'm talking about. Most people won't access that. They won't think to access that. And then they will be told, they'll be told all this pseudoscience that sounds so convincing and compelling that they'll just believe it. The worst thing, I think the worst sort of target audience for this is people who suffer with headaches and problems like that these claim to protect against. In the Verge article, there's a chap who says that this one product really does help, and he's tried like so many EMF protective products and most of them haven't helped. He's just been looking for a way to help his headaches. They claim that EMF can cause headaches, dizziness, pain of various kinds. And then they also, coincidentally, we have a product that can protect you from that and fix that for you. In fact, we have lots of products that you can spread all over your house, and all you have to do is give us thousands and thousands of dollars. How convenient. 5-star review, the first 5-star review on the website. Well, it looks pretty. Does it work? I don't know. I have no instrumentation to measure the results, so I have to take your word for it. Thank you, Bob, for your honesty. They have a whole affiliate page, I noticed, which is for either ambassadors, smaller influencers, and publishers, etc., which I assume Russell Brand is an affiliate. I would guess that he makes a tidy commission on any AirTech products that are sold through him. They have this page, which, and again, this is all going to be shared for you down below, but the some of the reactions I read from scientists to this website is they looked at it and said, yeah, this is garbage. They looked at the website, they saw the page of peer-reviewed journals, which is what they are. We'll talk in a second about why that doesn't necessarily matter. And we're just like, yeah, this is garbage. This is not real science. This is not what real science does. This looks ridiculous. So they have these amazing peer-reviewed papers saying that the technology really does work. They have all these long, complicated names that the average layman would not understand. People would just look at this, say, that sounds very sciencey, and they're peer-reviewed, so it must work. No, no, no. So I have scanned through these, the papers about the products specifically that say the protective action of the Air's microprocessor, etc., those ones. What the entire paper boils down to is, if it turns out EMF, non-ionizing, radiation that comes from mobile phones, etc., if it turns out that there were any harmful effects, this product might defend against that. It's on their website. You can download it for yourself. That is pretty much what they say. So this is regarding a product called the QI shield, or the Key Shield. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it's a similar product that claims to do the same thing, and it does the same thing in its scientific, papers, its scientific claims that AirTech products do. So I just wanted to read this for you. Waveguard's sole US partner, Synergy Science, promises, this is the other thing, is they all do their own studies. They all fund their own studies, which, if you know anything about the pharmaceutical industry in the USA, is a little bit of a red flag, just that you maybe should be aware of. Synergy Science promises that scientific studies by the German tech inspection company TÜV Süd, which is probably not said that like that, prove their effectiveness. But rather than showing the device significantly reduces exposure when near EMF signals, as its website claimed, the study showed that the device merely deflects the radiation field so that measurements are different when the device is present. That doesn't mean it provides any protection from the low-frequency radiation energy present. In fact, it may actually increase the exposure. After being contacted by The Verge, they removed the study from their website, but did not provide comment. All of these papers regarding the effectiveness of the products are, we observed different signals with the product present than without the product there, which means nothing. That really means nothing. Here's one of the more interesting for me things about AirTech and actually several other companies that sell these EMF protective products. This comes from a Digital Trends article, which I will of course share with you down below. The company's CEO, Dmitry Serov, told Digital Trends that the company, AirTech, started as a result of his family's research into the harmful effects of electromagnetic radiation. His father, Igor Serov, launched a questionable research firm in 1998 called Airs Research, which sought to harmonize the material existence of animate and inanimate natural objects. And since those are all words, that must be legit. So bearing that in mind, that the reason that Dmitry Serov started this company selling these incredibly overpriced EMF defense products, the reason he did that is because his father, Igor Serov, it's pronounced Igor. That's a very specific reference. I wonder if anyone will get that. Because his father, Igor Serov, started this research company, this dodgy research company, and performed all this research into electromagnetic frequencies. I just want to take a quick 1-second dive into some of these peer-reviewed papers to show you something. 2019 research report, Method for Protecting Biological Objects from the Negative Influence of Technogenic Electromagnetic Radiation by I. Serov. So that's the father of the CEO performing this research. 2018 research and development reports, calculation of the strength and intensity of the electromagnetic field, blah, blah, blah. Project manager, I. Serov. Every single one prepared for the submitters, American Aries Inc. This one, project manager, I. Serov. Reviews performed by Digital Trends found the scientific evidence and studies these companies quote on their websites unreliable and weak. All of AirTech's scientific publications have been authored by Igor Serov, its founder, or Andrew Mikrowski, who's on the management board. AirTech says its tags come equipped with a semiconductor that absorbs charges from the atmosphere to form a hologram. This hologram, Serov claims, restructures and transforms the EMF haze into a more biologically compatible form. Experts Digital Trends consulted found no evidence to back the efficacy of these products. Obviously, these products are elaborate theatrics and completely ineffective. That's Dr. David Robert Grimes, an assistant professor of biomedical physics at the Dublin City University, who also said, this is the chap that I mentioned earlier, he discovered an alarming number of pseudoscience red flags on AirTech's websites and concluded their explanations are buttressed with technobabble. That's a brilliant phrase. That's the phrase that I wanted earlier when I was trying to explain that they bloat their explanations with scientific sounding words. It's a bit like dodgy nutritionists will say the names of various chemicals and things and just sort of fill everything with straw in this way that makes it sound, because it is incomprehensible to the average person, it sounds like they must know what they're talking about because it sounds very scientific. An expert looks at that and goes, this is redundant and stupid. Because really, if you're an expert in any field and it's complicated and you want to explain it, you want to explain it in the simplest terms possible. Whereas scams and pseudoscience peddlers want to make it sound as complicated as possible. So that's a really good red flag to look out for in general. The FTC on multiple occasions has debunked such devices, labeling them as cell radiation scams. Unfortunately, a lot of conspiracy theory stuff, and I think the scammers and the peddlers of snake oil are partly responsible for this because it's in their best interests. A lot of conspiracy thinking involves a distrust of mainstream science, of government organizations, because that allows them then to go, yeah, but you don't trust those people. Like, you don't trust NASA about us going to the moon. That's ridiculous. Of course, they'd lie about it. Oh, this is also what I meant. I've clearly remembered a lot of this article without actually remembering the helpful details. The International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection confirmed to Digital Trends that there's no need for shielding accessories as long as proper guidelines are followed. It added that any external attempt to reduce exposure may result in more emitted power, since the device might think the connection gets worse, and thus the effect will be counteracted. So if you're worried about EMF, these products might even make it worse. So there's a figure in this article, Controversy in Electromagnetic Safety, which I just thought was quite well put together. This figure, the fundamental issue is the quality of science. Here's the quality of science, established versus possible, facts versus opinions. So here's the facts opinion line down the side. We increase in validity as we go up from F through to A. A, confirmed and established science, such as who has said time and time again the 70 years of studying into EMF and non-ionizing radiation that we have got the established science. Unconfirmed report is at B, could be useful. C, unconfirmed report contradicts A. If it contradicts the established science, it's less useful, it's less valid, but it's still possibly worth considering. Then we have unconfirmed report with clear flaws and artifacts. In E, second from the bottom, junk report in peer-reviewed literature, which is what I would categorize all of the Ayers Tech peer-reviewed reports under. It's junk. Not only when the scientists look at them are they not great reports, but they also don't really totally relate to the claims they're actually making about the products. They're sort of adjacent to the products. Oh, well, the signals are different when we use this product as opposed to when we don't. That makes absolutely no impact on the statement that this will affect your having headaches and dizziness. It's ludicrous. And then at the bottom, junk report in non-peer-reviewed literature, which is what the majority of the stuff is. So this is actually a company, SLNT. I've not heard of them before. I don't know if you maybe say it like slant, or I don't know. But this is a company that makes Faraday bags for you to put your devices in, which is sometimes useful, not for the sake of protecting you against EMF radiation. They've actually written about these stickers and pendants that protect you against EMF. Claims of substantial funding and extensive research into the development of these protective stickers may be flaunted. However, the testing often cited leans heavily on self-reported physiological responses, which may indicate a placebo effect rather than genuine protective efficacy against EMF radiation. Obviously, this is biased. Third-party signal blocking testing with actual science. Physiological response, aka self-determined placebo. EMF pendants, physiological response, aka self-determined placebo. Phone case, testing uses faulty data not tested with actual product. Scam, scam, scam. Literally a scam. I quite agree. This is also an interesting point. Research from the National Institute of Health into the potential health effects of radiofrequency radiation, which is part of the sort of fear tactics, and it notes that all of these findings where tumors did result in rats, for example, were using exposure levels much higher than we would ever use, much higher than is legal for mobile phone emission. This is a Healthline article just going over some of the concerns you may have, symptoms people report, and what you can do, and et cetera, et cetera. So low to mid-frequency EMFs, that's what we're talking about when we talk about mobile phones. This type of radiation is produced by any electronic device. These devices range from refrigerators and vacuum cleaners to televisions and computer monitors. I bet anyone who's putting the magic sticker on their phone is not also putting it on their refrigerator. According to WHO, extremely low frequency and radio frequency EMFs are unlikely to cause any adverse health effects. You should feel safe using your cell phone and appliances. The EMF strength around appliances diminishes rapidly with distance. At 1 foot, the magnetic field surrounding most household appliances are more than 100 times lower than the limit in the ICNERP guidelines for the general public. So their recommendation, if you are worried about EMF exposure, is to just put your phone away from you. Don't linger near appliances. Not spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on pseudoscience products. To kind of summarize then, low-level non-ionizing radiation is not considered to be harmful. We don't have any evidence to suggest it would be harmful. The effects that the conspiracy theorist and pseudoscience peddlers claim can happen tumors, cancerous tumors, things like that, would have happened already, given most of us are on our phones a ridiculous amount of time every day. It's my phone. I'm not on my phone that much, but it sits next to me pretty much all day, every day, and has done for years and years. Going back to what that chap said earlier, where are the bodies, right? These studies themselves, the peer-reviewed studies that these companies use to claim that their products really do work and that this is all real science, look, real scientists are involved in this, those studies boil down to the recorded signals put out by this device is different when we have the sticker versus when we don't. They say absolutely nothing about the health benefits. They are almost always, certainly with Aztec, they are always performed basically in-house by a company that is associated with them, by the father of the CEO of the company that he created. It's him authoring these papers that don't even say what they would love them to say, which is that this has a real proven benefit, hurrah, what we say is true. Even if their claims about EMF were real, their products wouldn't work to protect you from those signals in the way that they claim. If you want to block signals from your mobile phone, you need to completely surround your phone. You need a Faraday cage. Putting a sticker on one part of your phone will not do anything, except that interfering with your phone signal could potentially increase the signals because it might be trying to compensate. Similarly, wearing a magic amulet will not do. You might as well get a magic eye pendant. There's no, that would be much cheaper and probably better looking, like aesthetically. It just bothers me that people are scammers. It bothers me that somebody, I mean, maybe somebody like Russell Brand really believes in this. Maybe he is just a grifter and this is how he's going to make his money because, you know, he has been banned from this and that and demonetized here and there because of spreading misinformation, etc. So maybe this is just like, whatever, they're going to give me a good commission on these products, so fine, I'll just say whatever, or whether he actually believes them because his brain is fried, I don't know. It doesn't matter. If you are really concerned, then something like a Faraday bag is kind of the only thing that I would recommend. Even so, I would not recommend buying that from any company that claims that that will protect you from EMF radiation because they're still peddling the fear and making money off of that misinformation and pseudoscience. So while generally I don't have much of a problem with placebo, you know, products that grant you a placebo effect, if that really makes you feel better, that's fine. If it's like a 50p vitamin that you can get in any corner drugstore, then that's, you know, fine. Go, you know, live your life. I don't want you to feel bad for trying to, you know, improve your health, help your headaches or whatever. 99% of the time, it's not going to help you. And in this case, it's going to cost you a huge amount of money. And that money is propping up a company that is using this fear and peddling this fear. And it's going to just perpetuate that cycle forever. So that's Aztec. Let me know what you think down below. If anyone has any physicists or any biologists or anyone who's got some good insight into claims that any of these companies make, anything like that, good notes, funny anecdotes, do let me know down below. Let us know. It's only through education that we can combat these scams. This kind of pseudoscience scam relies on the fact that we don't, as a general public, we don't know a lot about radiation and, you know, technology, wireless technology, stuff like that. So the more information we can spread, the better. That being said, please do share this video if you thought it was helpful, if you liked it. Give it a little thumbs up, maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Do consider checking out Bono with the link down below. The best way to support this channel and what we do here is via the Patreon. With that, I must give a big old shout out and a thank you to my giant chickens and colossal quackers over on Patreon, especially Conla.
Trying to put the most intentionally disadvantaged populations on trial.
I won't even say it. I love you. I love you. I'll just say it straight up. I love you.
For the ways the system intended and expected that they would respond to the circumstances the government has left them in, which is precisely why the vast majority of people in our criminal system are represented by public defenders. And public defenders only represent people living well beneath the poverty line. And the government then makes billions and billions of dollars via fines and fees they charge those poor people and their families with and make through their unpaid labor. So again, how do I sleep? Sleep mode. Second question. If we abolish prisons, what do we do about rapists and murderers? First, that question implies that either the intention or the result of prisons is to deal with rapists and murderers. Neither is true. The police routinely choose to ignore cases of sexual violence, domestic violence, and murder when the victims are women or children or boys, and they tell the public that they weren't able to make an arrest for one dishonest reason or another. Time and time again, police have had far more than everything they've needed to make an arrest and simply chose not to. How many times have you been watching a true crime documentary and learned that the police allowed someone to continuously abuse their victim or repeatedly ignored the pleas of a victim before the person finally kills their victim? Too many. But instead of the true crime documentary highlighting how the police willfully failed to prevent the very kinds of horrible crimes they bamboozled the public into believing they're there to protect them from, and that the dangerous criminal the police simply ignored was just some especially advanced criminal who couldn't be stopped, my mind goes to Rodney Alcala, aka the dating game killer, who was the subject of the Netflix movie Woman of the Hour, starring Anna Kendrick. The Netflix movie tells an incredibly truncated version of the horrific and prolific murdering spree of Rodney Alcala, who is suspected of having killed more than 100 women, men, and children for at least a decade. The Netflix movie chooses to center itself around a woman Rodney Alcala met when he appeared on a dating show for one episode in the midst of his killing spree. The woman was played by Anna Kendrick, and the movie treats her as a protagonist, although in real life, she and the dating show could not be less relevant to the horror story that was this insidious, evil man's narrative. Because although Alcala did win the dating show, the woman played by Anna Kendrick told the studio that he seemed weird and she never actually went out with him or saw him again. What the movie does do better than most true crimes, though, is it attempted to highlight that the police failed to act. In the movie, a friend of one of Alcala's victims tells us that she has gone to the police to report Alcala, and she's shown both being ignored by the police and being ignored by the dating game studio when she tried to make the dating game studio aware that he was dangerous. And while I credit the movie with at least bothering to shine a little light on the negligence of the police, in real life, the truth was so much worse. There were so many horrific crimes the police willfully allowed Alcala to commit and or get away with. They had opportunity after opportunity to stop him, knowing he was a rapist, an abuser, a child molester. Would you even believe me if I told you that in 1968, the police knew Alcala had literally lured an 8-year-old girl into his apartment, brutally raped and beat her with a steel bar, and left her in a pool of her own blood, and she ended up spending 32 days in a coma? Police knew what happened because a man who'd witnessed Alcala luring the little girl into his apartment called the police. So that's how the police were able to arrive and find the little girl in her pool of blood. But somehow he managed to flee. And then the police made no effort to pursue his arrest warrant, allowing him to get all the way to New York City, where he continued killing people. In fact, in 1977, after already having been arrested, rearrested, and convicted for sexually assaulting another 13-year-old girl and becoming a registered sex offender, his parole officer just let him fly from LA to New York City, where he immediately murdered several other women. This went on repeatedly, where police knew exactly what danger he posed and had every opportunity to protect the public, but just shrugged their shoulders. But speaking of having the opportunity to protect yourself, today's sponsor is Aura. If you haven't been taking precautions with your personal information online before, today is the day to start, because you have never been more vulnerable than you are right now. This year has seen a number of high-profile data breaches, raising serious concerns about personal information security. Dell had a breach. United Healthcare had a breach. Even Ticketmaster had a breach. United Healthcare's breach was literally the largest ever healthcare data breach in U.S. history. Hackers have stolen over 2.9 billion records from national public data, which offers personal information for employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth dates. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free. That's why you need to use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know as soon as possible if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one app. You do not have to live like this and be vulnerable to hackers. Instead, you can go to my link, aura.com/Illuminati, to try 14 days for free. That's all the time Aura needs to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now. So again, Go to aura.com/Illuminati to start protecting your information, or click the link in the description below. Thank you for sponsoring Aura. Now, back to the video. And it doesn't even have to be a scenario as dangerous or rare as the dating game killer or a serial killer. The police fail to protect people from far less insidious figures every day. Do you remember Gabby Petito, the 22-year-old woman who was killed by her fiance Brian Laundrie in 2021? Probably. But do you also remember that he had assaulted Gabby the night before he killed her, and police responded to the scene and simply chose not to help her or to investigate? And police don't even just fail to investigate or make arrests in case of abuse. Sometimes they become the abusers. In 2020, a 14-year-old girl was raped by a 17-year-old, and already traumatized, this young girl didn't even want to report it. She just wanted it to be over with. But her mom called the police, and Officer Rodney McNair showed up. He stood in this mother and young girl's living room and convinced them she needed to report it. He said to the little girl, "If I'm a young man that has done something wrong to a young lady and she doesn't follow up and press the issue, then I'm gonna go out and do it to another young lady. And it's gonna be worse maybe the next time, because I'm gonna think in my head, oh, I got the power. I can go further this time," end quote. So the little girl agreed to make the report and go with him. He then proceeded to rape and groom that little girl for months. I don't really need to drive home what kind of monster does this. What I do need to drive home is just how common this is. Quote, "A Washington Post investigation has found that over the past 2 decades, hundreds of police officers have preyed on children, while agencies across the country have failed to take steps to prevent these crimes. At least 1,800 state and local police officers were charged with crimes involving child sexual abuse from 2005 through to 2022, the Post found. Abusive officers were rarely related to the children they were accused of raping, fondling, and exploiting. They most frequently targeted girls who were 13 to 15 years old and regularly met their victims through their jobs. Whenever you talk about abolition, which is in and of itself a vision for the future, but when you talk about abolishing police and prisons, people always reply, what about rape? What do we do about the rapists? And I'm always trying to explain to people that the criminal system we have is not about addressing rape. Not only would most victims of rape and sexual assault be the first ones to tell you that they got everything but compassion and justice when they tried to report what happened to them, but the perpetrators are often the police themselves. I say all that to say, I think a better question I think people could ask defense attorneys and abolitionist types like myself if you really want to tussle and see a difference of opinion. And it's a question I'm actually going to be exploring today, because I think a lot of people and abolitionists actually do struggle with this. And that's, what do we do about killer cops? Or put simpler, can people who believe prisons should be abolished demand that police who commit police brutality and kill people be criminally charged and sent to the very prisons we want abolished? My short answer is yes, but I believe that the fruitlessness of that endeavor is precisely why we should be abolitionists. Allow me to talk the air off for a little while so that hopefully by the time I'm done, that answer makes sense to you. Reasonable minds can disagree though. My guy, Alex Vitale, author of End of Policing, and who I consider an authority on abolition, haven't seen exactly eye to eye on this topic, although I do not disagree with him at all. If you ask Alex this question, he would probably say something along the lines of, no, you either can't be an abolitionist and call for the charging of killer cops, or that you at least shouldn't be an abolitionist calling for the charging of killer cops. Because in one way or another, you're enforcing and legitimizing the very system you want abolished. And you're playing into this idea that what justice is criminal charges and convictions. And that underlying rationale enables the prison industrial complex to keep expanding. And he is not wrong. That is sound. And I pretty much agree. I just have a little bit more to say on it. I believe that as an abolitionist, you can 1, enjoy seeing killer cops prosecuted, 2, join in on the people's protests or demands that killer cops be charged, 3, draw attention to how infrequently killer cops are prosecuted by the criminal system, or 4, wish killer cops felt the weight of the criminal system they weaponize against people every day, so long as you recognize and explicitly make clear in your advocacy that prosecuting killer cops is not justice. That it does not do shit to save any lives, to stop police brutality, to root out injustice, or to reform the criminal system in any way. It does nothing to change the circumstances that led to the particular police killing or to prevent another one from happening again. At most, it allows people and communities who are grieving, who live under the weight of the criminal system's cruelty, to see the people who usually enact that cruelty get a little bit of their comeuppance once in a while. And for Black people living in a nation where police disproportionately brutalize our communities for generations, I cannot scold Black people or anyone really, abolitionists or not, for wanting to see the system that oppresses them, that very much so still exists, just once in a while get the oppressors themselves. For me, I highlight when police kill people, and I highlight when they haven't been charged, and when they're charged but not convicted. I don't highlight that because I believe justice is charging or convicting killer cops. I don't highlight that because I want it to happen. I highlight that because it's proof of precisely why this system should be abolished, because it functions to protect white supremacy. The mere fact alone that police murder people daily but are seldom ever punished at work, let alone by the legal system, is itself evidence of why we shouldn't trust in the system or expect it to protect us. So for me, I point out that killer cops rarely get charged, not because I think they should or shouldn't get away with murder, but because I'm trying to help everyone else see that regardless of what you want, the system is designed for police to get away with murder and general brutality, because it's a system that enables it to happen in the first place. It doesn't only empower them to do it, but it's what it expects to happen. The violence is routine. It's a part of the job. It's how they control and beat specific populations into submission. You wouldn't know it if you checked the news or the trending topics on your social media timelines, but the police have killed 1,145 people so far this year that we know of. I don't think this will come as a surprise to anyone, but the media lies to us. But more than that, the media shapes what we think and how we see the world around us. Media does that through the stories they choose to cover, how they choose to cover those stories, what they fail to cover altogether, what they underreport, and what they overreport. The media sensationalizes crime by overreporting much rarer occurrences of violent crime and overreporting things like retail theft and outright manufacturing crime waves even when crime is at an all-time low. But you probably knew all that. I think most people are aware of how the media and social media alike can overrepresent some things as opposed to others. But I'm betting that there is a significant amount of people who would disagree with me if I said, you know what the media does in fact underreport? Police killing people. And I wanted to intentionally distinguish between police brutality and police killing because it's important that we understand that it does not have to rise to the level of murder to be police brutality, abuse, or criminal conduct on behalf of the police. Murder is a form, if not the height of police brutality, but it's not the only thing that qualifies as police brutality. Because media has shaped our understanding of police brutality, the everyday violence of police on our streets and within our criminal system doesn't get treated as though it's police brutality. And I say within our criminal system because the abuse of incarcerated people has been completely left out of the police brutality narrative altogether, as so many people see the abuse of incarcerated people as permissible, as an acceptable function and consequence of ending up in the system, which is why people die in jails all around the country every day and the media doesn't even bother to report their names, and no one makes them. Places like the New York State Department of Corrections have gone a step further and straight up will not tell the public about the deaths happening behind bars anymore altogether. And they're able to do that through no true pushback or mass outrage. We've become so accustomed to media and entertainment that casually displays police routinely being aggressive and assaulting people during the course of arrests or interrogations without scrutiny that we often don't process that kind of behavior as improper or illegal or even brutality because we see it as acceptable policing, which in and of itself demonstrates how inextricable brutality is from policing. I know that the American public, mostly the non-Black American public, right and the left, believes that police brutality is covered ad nauseum because whenever the media does cherry pick a single murder the police committed, like was the case with George Floyd in 2020, the left complains about ally fatigue and the right launches campaigns to end the woke mind virus by banning books, taking history out of the schools, defunding education, and ending affirmative action. But despite how much either group may think they're being beat over the head with coverage about police killings, they're maybe being politely tapped on the back of their shoulder once in a while with the occasional chalk-lined reminder that no matter how modern and progressive our world can look, if you're busy staring at the Obamas and other examples of Black excellence, people are being murdered by the police quite literally every single day in this country. For every George Floyd or Breonna Taylor that you hear about, there's a Drayshawn Reed and a Bijan Kizzy and a Dan White Henry you didn't. We are 11 months into 2024 and the police have killed at least 1,145 people this year. But how many of those cases have you heard about? How many? I don't wager very many. My heart breaks for Sonia Massey, the 36-year-old Black woman who was killed this year because she called 911 for help, only for Illinois police to arrive and shoot her to death in her own home. My heart breaks for 43-year-old Kevin Durham, who was in his home with his 15-year-old daughter in Vegas just nights ago when intruders broke in with a gun. Kevin tried to wrestle the intruders off. He tried to protect his daughter, and he called called the police for help, only for the police to arrive, and instead of stopping the intruders, the police shot Kevin to death in his own home. They shot him 5 times. Last year, police killed at least 1,240.
Yeah, that is fucking completely nuts. Both of those cases are like take the guns away from the cops. Like now. Like we have data. Cops don't need to be carrying guns like this, and you don't need to be like just ready to shoot somebody, dude. It's so fucked, dude. Naughty. I mean, I don't know if that's your actual name. Olay. So do you prefer Olay? You are one of my new favorites. You've reached the top 3 super quick.
3 people, and that's just actually who they admit to killing, because there's no telling how many they're not admitting to. Because understand that the police don't just defend themselves against the murders we watch them commit on video, they cover murders up too. In 2019, Louisiana police told Ronald Green's family that he died in a car accident immediately after hitting a tree. It was more than 2 years later when the family obtained body camera footage revealing the police kicked, dragged, and tased him to death. Just last year, Betterston Wade spent 172 days searching for her son Dexter Wade. She reported him missing to the police, and they told her that they could not find him. The whole time, they had known that on March 5th, 2023, less than an hour after Dexter left his mother's home, a Jackson police officer hit him with his car and killed him as he walked across the road. The police knew his name, they knew his mother's name, they knew she was looking for him, but they told her nothing and allowed her son's body to sit in a county morgue unclaimed until he was buried in an unmarked grave in a penal farm. What I'm trying to drive home is that there are only 365 days in a year, and the Lion-ass police still admit to more killings than there are days every year. Every year. And it's worth mentioning that of the 1,243 people that police admit to killing in 2023, 27% of them were black, despite the fact that black people only make up 13% of the population. But this conversation isn't even about the fact that police disproportionately kill black people. It's bigger than that. I'm sure you've heard someone say they don't want to become just another hashtag, but the real fucked up reality is that most people the police murder don't even get that much. We only hear about police brutality if people are able to force it into the discourse and public outrage demands the police be charged. And that's what I really want to talk about today. 98.1% of police are not charged with the killings they commit. And of the few that are, only a third are convicted. But I'm sure you didn't need the statistics to know that. How many times have you seen that a prosecutor declined to charge officers who killed someone? How many times have you seen grand juries choose not to indict, or for the only consequence an officer who killed someone to experience is paid administrative leave? And the issue on top of another issue is not only is it incredibly rare for killer cops to be charged or convicted, the few times they are, the media and the government try to convince the public that this is justice and proof that the system is changing somehow, when that could not be further from the truth. My mind goes to the murder of George Floyd and the way this nation was placated by the conviction of Derek Chauvin, the officer who snuffed his life out after kneeling on his neck and ignoring his pleas. I remember people rejoicing when he was convicted, either pretending or truly wanting to believe that this conviction, the protest they witnessed that summer, meant anything other than one officer was being discarded in order to protect the entire institution. The whole purpose of cherry picking and choosing some killer cops to punish once in a blue moon for things the entire institution of police do regularly is to further entrench this idea in people's minds that policing is not the problem. Just these specific police officers were the problem. And all that needs to be done to correct the problem is to get rid of them. The sacrificial lamb, so to speak. Which is part of the reason why I don't think police and other agents of white supremacy should be the primary beneficiaries of our advocacy as abolitionists. And why grieving communities calling for the prosecution of killer cops did not hurt our efforts as abolitionists. Because not only is our advocacy as abolitionists much better served anywhere else than in service of our oppressors. The system will rarely prosecute killer cops regardless of the ones whose communities they harm. And those that are prosecuted were not prosecuted because we wanted them prosecuted. They were accounted for by the system that always planned to sacrifice a few to appease us. The rare and deliberate prosecution of a handful of killer cops is not what's upholding our criminal system or preventing it from being abolished. There are far bigger fish to fry. But more than that, who am I to tell black mothers grieving their children who've been murdered by the police that in the current world, where the criminal system still exists and punishes them daily and harshly, that they should not call for the police to be punished, as they would have been had they done the same? Am I to tell grieving family they're legitimizing and enabling the prison industrial complex? I don't think it's necessary we do that. The system will ignore the many killer police and sacrifice a few regardless. And that's what Derek Chauvin was. Just like it's what the 5 black officers who beat Tyree Nichols to death were. Because at the exact moment the nation celebrated Derek Chauvin's conviction and the lie of a new America, over in Columbus, Ohio, police officer Nicholas Reardon was shooting a 16-year-old black girl to death. Her name was Ma'Khia Bryant, and she was in foster care. Ma'Khia was being attacked by 2 adult women, and she was holding a knife to defend herself from these 2 adult women attacking her. And the police, the ones so many believe, protect, and serve, arrived on the scene, and instead of helping that child, he shot her 4 times and killed her. And on March 11, 2022, a grand jury declined to charge that officer because one conviction means nothing. It changes nothing, and it does not save a single life. So while I will never judge or oppose the people who seek charges for killer cops, I want us to focus less on how we respond to killer cops and focus more on what we can do to prevent them from killing people, which will require us to tackle over-policing, starting with removing police from things they absolutely do not need to be handling, like mental health crises, traffic offenses, schools. Abolition is a vision of the future, a world where we've invested in people and communities and rid ourselves of the conditions that create crimes and thus have done away with the need for prisons and policing. But we know that prisons and police will not be abolished overnight. So while it's here, in spite of all our wishing and resistance, in my mind, I don't think there's any material reason why on the rare occasion the system intentionally chooses to sacrifice individual killer cops for the sole purpose of protecting the system at large. An abolitionist, a human being with emotion like everyone else, someone a part of a community they're fighting with and for, isn't allowed to rejoice in that with the rest of the community if they so choose, or to simply support their community in that pursuit because it's how that community is choosing to cope, to grieve, so long as they're clear about what those charges or convictions mean in the grand scheme of dismantling the system and saving future lives, which isn't very much. I oppose the criminal system precisely because it protects and upholds white supremacy. So there's no reason why being an abolitionist would require me to oppose the rare instances when white supremacists who enforce and weaponize that criminal system are sacrificed by that system. You can be an abolitionist and simply not give a fuck what happens to killer cops.
My first guest tonight is a 2-time Grammy-winning artist and one of the biggest stars in hip-hop music. Please welcome P. Diddy. You're legendary for the parties that you throw. You throw a great party.
Why you gotta bring Conan into this?
What do you do to make just an amazing killer party? This is what you need to do. Right. Not just one alcohol. Alcohols. Right. Heat. Physically, the place has to be hot.
You don't have no air conditioning.
No air conditioning. Why is that?
Heat affects the alcohol, and it also affects, like, everybody gets a little bit more comfortable and loose. Goes up a night and it's sweat.
That just sounds disgusting.
It's a little kinky, yeah. Broccoli, but just check it out. You need locks on the doors.
It is sounding kind of dangerous now.
The 17th
September 2024, federal agents closed in on one of the most depraved and notorious suspects of the 21st century. After a lengthy investigation and almost a year of constant negative headlines, the billionaire rap mogul saw his last glimpse of freedom fade out at the Park Hyatt Hotel on West 57th Street, New York City. The following day, prosecutors moved to indict Sean Diddy Combs on charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution, to which he responded with an emphatic not guilty plea. The judge denied him bail, and Mr. Combs was ushered away to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where he would share a cell with another disgraced billionaire, FTX's very own Sam Bankman-Fried. His lawyer, Mr. Mark Agnifilo, rallied at such an injustice, proclaiming Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent, defending his client as a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and a proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the black community. Given the breadth of these claims, there's no doubt Mr. Agnifilo will have quite the uphill battle trying to prove that is the case.
We're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna fight till we get him out.
But what led up to this pivotal moment? And what does the evidence tell us about his client? Did our loving family man, Mr. Combs, not orchestrate the seemingly endless litany of wicked crimes he was charged with? Or did he?
Sean Combs, also known as Puffy, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, and Love.
The music mogul has been behind bars since September.
Diddy's out there trying to influence witnesses. It really puts his lawyers in a bad position.
But first, I want to tell you a little bit about pie. No, not the delicious baked dish commonly enjoyed around Thanksgiving, the ad blocker. Idiots. See, Pi is on a mission to rebuild the internet with people in control, which starts by rebuilding the economic engine that powers the internet, which is an unnecessarily complex way of saying that Pi isn't just a free ad blocker that allows you to browse the internet on your own terms. It also allows you to watch ads disappear in real time thanks to visual mode. Not to mention, you can even get paid for viewing certain ads. Yeah, I'm not making that up. It says it in the brief. If I said that and it wasn't in the brief, I'd get sued. You can get paid for sitting on your ass and doing nothing, which is one of my favorite things to do. To make your shopping experience better, Pi can also give you cash back and apply coupons at lightning speed at over 10,000 stores, making it the first ever ad blocker to allow all rewards to come through. 50% of the US already uses an ad blocker, so you may as well use one that's actually going to give you rewards back. It's all free, so you have literally nothing to lose. It gives you more deals and shows you less ads. What more could you want? Peace on Earth? Not gonna happen. Just click the link in the description below and visit pi.org/Jobry to begin earning rewards today. Huge thanks again to Pi for sponsoring this video, and now back to what will undoubtedly be a very depressing time.
Hostile UAV established overhead.
For anyone who felt a little quirky and decided to start with part 2 of this series and is either unable or can't be bothered to click off, in part 1, I documented the many growing lawsuits against the artist popularly known as P. Diddy. The onslaught of extremely serious allegations against him and many of his associates. These include pretty much every undesirable crime you can imagine, with multiple victims claiming they endured years of sustained abuse from Diddy and his inner circle. This whirlwind of allegations all began with the publication of Cassie Ventura's lawsuit at the end of 2023. And although it was settled in the space of a day, the larger story certainly did not end there. At the release of my first video, there were many developments occurring in real time, and it was hard to know exactly when they would stop. Honestly, I don't think they've even stopped now. But with the hip-hop mogul Bad Boy CEO currently sitting in prison awaiting trial, I think it would be a good time to fill you guys in with some updates, because oh my god, there hasn't exactly been a shortage of them. I'm afraid if the man faces any more charges, he might just have to run for president. But before anything else has the chance to come to light, let's go ahead and jump into everything we know as of today. We're going to be discussing a lot of claims today, but first, I want to get to some of the lesser-known cases. In August of this year, Combs was sued by Alfredo P. Gonzalez, a member of the Sinaloa cartel, with claims that he had interfered with their drug trafficking trade. Gonzalez asserts that on May 5th, 2021, a business partner of Combs contacted him with the request that they set Diddy and his associates up with some deals, if you know what I'm saying. Gonzalez hastily agreed before finding out that such drugs would be provided to potentially underage individuals, at which point he withdrew his consent. The business partner then attempted to broker this deal again, at which point Gonzalez became increasingly agitated by the calls and said he wanted nothing to do with their, quote, sex offender shit. In response, the business partner threatened to ruin Gonzalez's business, which is allegedly exactly what he did. Gonzalez claims that Combs and his crew ran a subsequent smear campaign that cost him practically all of his business contacts in the local area. Gonzalez was looking for $666,000 worth of damages, which I guess is meant to be symbolic of Diddy's demonic nature. When dealing with a character like Diddy, who can become aggressive and violent when people refuse to surrender to his request, if you watch my first video, you'll see he's threatened to ruin many lives in the past. There must be some attention given to these claims, but in this case, they were swiftly dismissed. Writing in an order for dismissal, a judge explained that the drug cartel is not a legally protected interest and therefore cannot be escalated as a case. The judge also stated that the claims are frivolous and not really backed up with any circumstantial evidence, let alone physical evidence. It's important to note that none of this necessarily means Gonzalez is lying, but it does make it harder to prove, particularly when your point of contention is that you lost contacts in an already illegal business. This also isn't Gonzalez's first rodeo. In 2023, he sued Joe Biden and a variety of other federal organizations and individuals for torture and conspiracy to murder, running a mission known as Operation Kill King Lucifer. Again, knowing what we know about the United States government, this certainly isn't out of the question, but this case was again thrown out of the courts for lack of evidence and denied on appeal. Unfortunately, as a cartel member, it seems that Gonzalez may have a lack of legal standing, yet his was not the only court case to come from inside a penitentiary.
Cardello Smith, sir?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. This is in the matter of Derek Lee Cardello Smith, MDOC number 267009 versus Sean Combs, Sean Puff Daddy Combs, also known as Sean P. Diddy, also known as Diddy, Bad Boy Records, label owner, founder, also known as Puff P. Daddy, Bad Boy, Diddy Run the City, Sean Combs, also known as Sean Puffy Combs.
At the beginning of August, serial litigant and repeat offender Derek Lee Cardello Smith filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent Combs from selling assets that could potentially be used to compensate Cardello Smith for possible damages, per the Detroit Metro Times. In his court appearance, Cardello Smith alluded to allegations that Diddy had sexually assaulted him and attempted to pay him off with hush money. More details were confirmed the following day on the Law and Crime Network, which shared court documents alleging that while working as a bartender, Cardello Smith had been lured to a Diddy party where he was roofied and subsequently penetrated by Combs.
It's a very serious matter. It involves a lot of money. A lot of money. And him selling this would help him avoid his liability for these actions done upon him. And I was just hoping that I'd be able to get the restraining order to prevent that. There won't be any harm to him, any of the parties. There won't be any harm to him in any way. And if it's deemed that it's not justified, then he can go ahead and go through with the sale.
Cardello Smith also alleges that Combs bribed officers to keep the incident under wraps and even appeared at the prison to try and pay him off to the tune of $2.3 million, backing this up with visitation records that reportedly proved Diddy had in fact visited the inmate. When Diddy put his California house up for sale, Cardello Smith argued it would interfere with court proceedings and therefore the order should be placed to prevent the mogul from selling said property. At first, this all may seem a little far-fetched given the circumstances surrounding the case, but after hearing this information, the judge did in fact grant Cardello Smith's request, slapping Diddy with a 90-day injunction, which even seemed to catch Cardello Smith by surprise.
Okay, so
All right,
the order
so-
was granted?
The order, your ex parte motion was granted, or your motion for a temporary restraining order was granted. I've signed it.
But Derek Lee Cardello Smith wasn't finished, as the man then went on to request a default judgment of $100 million in his favor, something that the judge advised him on moving forward with. This is a case I find particularly interesting, as although Cardello Smith has an extensive rap sheet and record for filing frivolous lawsuits, the arguments he presents here are not unsound. And if there were no grounding to this case, why would Diddy visit the prison? With the lack of response from Combs, he was requested to produce an answer to the court by September 9th, something that he, of course, didn't do. With this absence taken into account, Cardello Smith was actually awarded the sum of $100 million. Yes, you heard that right. Although Combs had not responded to the courts up until that point, his lawyer eventually responded, clarifying that Combs had never heard of Cardello Smith, nor been served with any court documents, describing the plaintiff as a convicted felon and sexual predator turned courtroom fraudster, with Diddy's lawyers moving swiftly to overturn this judgment, using the fact that the statute of limitations had expired to have the case thrown out, and maintaining that Combs was not aware of the case until the judgment had already been made. Cardello Smith responded by accusing Combs' lawyers of lying and the Michigan Department of Corrections of interfering with the case, which was at least given some credence from the corrections spokesperson. However, the money was set aside and the case moved to the Michigan Eastern District Court, where the dizzying back and forth has continued to this day, with Combs' lawyers pushing for a dismissal and Cardello Smith pushing for a remand, a jury trial, and compensation of now $405 million. Whether or not Diddy truly knows this person is something that will be determined in court. This one is less clear-cut than Alfredo Gonzalez's lawsuit, and Cardello Smith has produced evidence and affidavits that seem to confirm at least some circumstances surrounding the details of the case. His status as a convicted sexual felon doesn't really invalidate the possibility of him being a victim of sexual abuse himself, and previous dismissed lawsuits have alleged his victimhood at the hands of other institutes. Yet, as well-spoken as he is hell-bent on advocating for quite a radical theory that asserts his innocence in practically all his prior convictions at the hands of a deep-seated conspiracy against him. There is nothing I can really say on this matter without making an entire separate video, as my research began to take me down some deeper rabbit holes than I anticipated, but it was indicative of Diddy's declining power. That even though Cardello Smith didn't appear to be the most credible source on paper, he had successfully secured multiple judgments in his favor and prolonged the court case in spite of the efforts of Combs and his lawyers. No matter what the source was, Diddy's documented behavior meant that this was a possibility. And if this was a possibility, then there were other cases that moved back into the legal purview as well. In the last video, we went over Lil Rod's 73-page lawsuit against P. Diddy and many of his alleged associates. Following some amendments, by March 25th, it had ballooned into 98 pages and demanded a response from all parties involved. Some co-defendants responded quickly, but Combs and Co. took their time, waiting until the end of August to publish a response, along with none other than a motion to dismiss. Shocking. However, this response certainly does give us a look into the mind of P. Diddy and his defense, and that's what I want to focus on here. The preliminary statement is something else. Combs' lawyer for the case, Erica Wolf, opens by accusing Jones of dressing his grievances up with countless tall tales, shameless celebrity name drops, and irrelevant images. They then attack Rodney Jones's lawyer, Tyrone Blackburn, implying that his recent referral to the court's grievance committee for manufacturing lawsuits in a way that draws media attention could compromise the legitimacy of the case. I won't go out of my way to defend the format of the original lawsuit. Its use of pictures and language is somewhat sensationalist and unprofessional and probably shouldn't have been presented as it was, but that also doesn't invalidate the claims being made. And I'd say that anyone who decides to settle a lawsuit with incriminating claims against them is still not acting in their best interest, even if they are innocent, regardless of how much media attention it draws. But there is plenty more to this preliminary statement. Not shying away from colorful language herself, Wolf immediately draws attention to a post on Twitter where Rodney Jones Jones is filmed laughing about the lawsuit, despite stating that it caused significant emotional distress. He said he was sad about something, but here he is happy. I'm sorry, but this is some YouTube commentary bullshit. How can Diddy's legal team accuse Jones of playing to the tabloids when they are blatantly playing to the masses here as well? Wolf responds to the claims surrounding racketeering by stating that there isn't really enough of a pattern established to prove anything, which I'm not sure if I agree with her on that one, but maybe that's just the power of hindsight. He also uses the word hodgepodge, so you know you're dealing with a real legal heavyweight here. The essence of these refutations seems to harp on the fact that Jones's claims are vague, but just because Jones doesn't reference the exact days these events occurred on doesn't mean they can't be proven. After all, Jones repeatedly states that he has overwhelming evidence for all of this. I'd also say that outside of the lack of dates, these details aren't that vague at all and mention events in reasonable detail meriting some attention given his already established pattern of behavior. The other angle that Wolf takes is that Jones's claims are so implausible that they shouldn't possibly be given any attention, such as the notion that Mr. Combs was willing to provide millions of dollars in rewards to his record producer if only he would have sex with sex workers, which it may sound ridiculous without any other context, but is it really that implausible when we're reminded of who we're dealing with and the power that he likes to wield around others? Calling Diddy a freak is an insult to freaks. I don't think the public needs to be sold on the notion of Diddy being an absolute maniac. You saw the intro of this video, and the man likes to party, as he puts it. Another great comment from Wolf is that Jones's only real specific allegation against her client was the quote arguable threat of violence, that Diddy would eat Jones's face. Outside of the fact that in the original document, this statement is accompanied by the accusation that Diddy threatened to kill Jones's mother if he didn't get what he wanted, what part of eating someone's face is arguably a threat? Was P. Diddy just really hungry? I understand it's hard to defend the indefensible, but there are some parts of this that really should have just stayed in the draft, such as her claim that Lil Rod's trafficking allegation doesn't stand up because it's too, quote, outlandish to even be considered. Even if we ignore everything else and say this was far-fetched, the document references court case Gallup v. Cheney, where the plaintiff alleged that the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon didn't happen. How these cases are remotely comparable is beyond my understanding. This is the best legal representation you could get with a net worth in the billions, Diddy? Look at my lawyer, dog. I'm going to fucking jail. The rebuttal to Jones's 9th claim of punitive damages due to emotional distress states that this cannot be valid because it does not outline, quote, which alleged sexual assault it is based on. I'm sorry? What? Does Lil Rod have to choose? There's so many. Yet Wolf continues to fight the allegation that she is a serious lawyer by claiming that the sexual assault claims are also invalid because Jones fails to, quote, allege essential facts such as the where, when, and how how of the purported misconduct. The how, I assume, being the, quote, unsolicited and unauthorized groping and touching of his anus by Mr. Combs. Do you really need further details of how that happens? The original lawsuit states the locations of these incidents were LA, New York, Florida, St. Bartholomew, and the United States Virgin Islands. But I suppose you're expecting the zip codes too? As for the when, I suppose you could give more details, but I think Jones's point was that it happened so regularly that it would be excessive to list out each and every instance. I think the point is that you can assume this occurred during the time that Jones worked with Combs, which is listed earlier in the court document. I feel like if we go any further here, we'll just be going backwards, but this does outline Diddy's method of really just attempting to attack the character of his victims, picking apart unnecessary details of the allegations, and playing into the greater narrative that none of these people are actually recalling real experiences, they're just simulating ideas based on a narrative. And maybe there are some lawsuits that are doing that, but that narrative wouldn't exist in the first place if it wasn't based on anything tangible. And even if we discount these past 3 lawsuits as unreliable or manufactured for nefarious purposes, when you look at the publicly available information, the picture is still the same, and that has legal consequences spanning decades. Tupac Shakur was an American rapper who became a figurehead of 1990s West Coast hip-hop. Revered by many as one of the most influential recording artists of the 20th century, his life was also entangled in numerous controversies and feuds with other recording artists, especially those from the rivaling East Coast hip-hop scene. In September 1996, this ongoing conflict would tragically culminate in his death at the hands of a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. With such a high-profile murder in a densely populated area, one would otherwise assume this would be easy to solve, and yet it quickly became clear that many were unable and were unwilling to help with the following investigation, with various names being implicated but no one being formally convicted. The main suspect at the time, Orlando Anderson, was murdered before he was charged, and the case went cold for many years. At the time, Diddy was a prominent figure on the East Coast scene, a friend of fellow rapper Biggie, who was also tragically gunned down the following year in what was widely considered a revenge shooting for Tupac. As we touched on in part 1, Combs appeared on a posthumous track for Biggie while also creating I'll Be Missing You, a tribute to the late rapper. But other than being a grieving peer, was Diddy's involvement in this rivalry more than just that of a bystander?
So do you think Tuffy was involved in the shooting?
Only they can answer that question. I have my own opinion, but I wouldn't slander their name like they did mine. I wouldn't say things that I mean. You know what I mean? I believe so. I do believe so. I have a few things that I can say that will back up my claim, but this is not for the world to know about. You know what I mean? It's between me and him, and only he knows. So every time you say anything, that's the only thing that makes this become an issue to everybody.
Combs had been implicated in prior shootings by his enemies, but his rhetoric of peace and unity had always successfully thrown the spotlight off of him. Yet even after Tupac's death, there had been a continuing dialogue over whether Diddy put out a hit on the West Coast icon that led to his death, with scarce references such as that in the Eminem song Kill Shot, even if he insists at the end that he's just playing. In 2023, though, there was finally a break in the case. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, Anderson's uncle, was indicted on charges related to Tupac's murder, with the trial date currently set for March 2025. Yet on July the 24th of this year, it was revealed that Diddy had been named 77 times in court documents tying Keefe D. to Pac's murder, claiming that the mogul had in fact placed a $1 million bounty on the head of producer Suge Knight, a longtime associate of Tupac's who was injured in the Vegas shooting.
There was the rumor that after Pac got killed, Puffy gave Zip $1 million that was supposed to be handed over, and Zip ended up keeping it. The Fed said that too. He said that actually happened. Yeah, that's what I said. So the FBI told you to say that. So the FBI told him Zip kept that money. So he said Zip kept that money.
This isn't a huge shock, as Keefe D had long tied Diddy to the shooting in the media. However, the details of a, quote, surreptitiously recorded interview in 2008 where he confesses his own involvement would definitely give the claim some validity, to say the least. In the interview, Keefe D tells investigators that Diddy had put the hit out in a hotel room before sending the money to another accomplice, Eric Von Zip Martin. Even more interestingly, Keefe D has since insisted he wasn't trying to incriminate anyone, yet this directly contradicts that claim. Is it possible he's afraid of what Diddy is capable of? Given all we know about the mogul, I wouldn't blame him if he was. Shortly after the release of this information, it was revealed that Tupac's family retained attorneys to investigate lawsuit prospects, later hiring celebrity lawyer Alex Spiro to look into connections between Combs and the high-profile killing. Only time will tell what that investigation might yield, but if Combs's other cases are anything to go by, there may still be some dark secrets to be revealed yet.
Those girls that was, I think Danny Kane, he said, I'ma drug them out. I'm gonna get them all on drugs, and I'm gonna pimp their ass out to my... I was like, there's somebody kids. They walked out.
For those of you old enough to remember the 2000s, Danity Kane was an American girl group who had 2 Billboard Top 10 hits in the latter half of the decade while working under producer P. Diddy. After Diddy dramatically fired 2 members on live television, Danity Kane disbanded but reunited a couple times in the 2010s before going on an indefinite hiatus in 2020. There had long been stories circulating as to why this was, with former members speaking in innuendo as to what led to their eventual retirement.
I wasn't willing to do what was expected of me. Not talent-wise, but in other areas.
Finally, on the 10th of September 2024, a lawsuit was filed by musician Donna Richard, a prominent member of Danity Kane, who later worked directly with Combs on the project Diddy Dirty Money. Richard alleged that she witnessed much of Diddy's violence firsthand, and when attempting to intervene or provide emotional support to those affected, was met with threats from Diddy that he ends people. Further to this, Richard stated that she was subject to inhumane and abusive working conditions that deprived her of basic rights and needs under his employment. Going into more detail, Richard states that she met Combs on the set of the show Making the Band, a series which featured new vocal groups being formed under Diddy's watchful eye. Combs' aggressive misogyny was made immediately apparent through his disparaging remarks and callous judgments, but his predatory nature only revealed itself when Richard witnessed his first meeting with Cassie Ventura, immediately isolating her and showering her with attention. Diddy's treatment of Richard and her bandmates would only worsen, though, as he would keep them rehearsing for up to 2 days uninterrupted, without sleep or food. This caused Richard to lose an excessive amount of weight and experience multiple adverse physical reactions, such as vomiting, dehydration, fatigue, and rashes. In fact, it became so bad that Richard would regularly sleep in a sitting position, fully dressed and with a full face of makeup. Diddy would continuously flaunt his power, holding hour-long meetings in his underwear, requiring her to strip down and using Richard's dire financial situation after the breakup of Danity Kane to exploit her abilities. The sheer horror of Ventura and Combs' abusive relationship only set in after Richard agreed to collaborate with Combs on Dirty Money, witnessing multiple instances of horrific violence and direct threats if they spoke out about it, including an incident that occurred in front of Interscope CEO Jimmy Iovine and other A-list celebrities, days before a record deal between Diddy and Interscope was finalized. Further to this, Richard attests to attending multiple Diddy parties against her will, where multiple women of questionable legal age were drugged and sexually assaulted by Diddy and his guests in front of her, leading to one instance where Richard barricaded herself in her bedroom while events were unfolding at Diddy's Florida estate. The lawsuit explicitly described that Diddy would brag about ushering, quote, busloads of young exotic girls to his property, confiscating their phones upon entry, and keeping the doors, quote, locked and guarded by security personnel so that no one, including Richard, could leave the premises without alerting Diddy. The lawsuit also states that police officers would attend these parties as well, reinforcing a, quote, climate of fear and sending a, quote, tacit warning that reporting to authorities would be both unacceptable and futile. Being subject to Diddy's management while working on Dirty Money, Richard's health issues returned, this time to the point of hospitalization, where she was diagnosed with serious joint pain, anemia, and a low white blood cell count. This didn't change Diddy's behavior, though, as he remained persistent in his demanding and volatile ways, exhibiting extreme bouts of rage and violence towards anyone and anything, showing continuous verbal and physical contempt to those in his life. There's too much to detail here without it feeling indulgent, but this all seems to escalate to an incident in 2010 when Richard decided to stand up to Combs after he became verbally abusive at a rehearsal for Saturday Night Live. After being told to dial it down a notch, Diddy decides to take a swing at Richard, only for her to be taken aside by Combs' bodyguard and locked away in the company car, which notably had no interior door handles. She was only released after she called her father, who traveled up to demand she be let out of the car. Both Richard and her father ultimately received threats if they were to speak out about this incident. Despite all of her time and effort devoted to Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, Dawn Richard claims she has not been properly compensated for multiple creative contributions to either, and provides credits for which she wishes to be reimbursed. Alongside this, she states the trauma that she has suffered, both mental and physical, meet the threshold for compensatory and punitive damages, something she hopes the court will consider in the form of a jury trial. It's a pretty damning and detailed document that falls squarely in line with most of what we know about Diddy so far, and his response was pretty in line with what we would expect as well, appearing to frame Richard's move as a publicity stunt with the upcoming release of her new album. Diddy's lawyer, Erica Wolf, states that if Richard really witnessed and experienced all of this abuse, then she would never have actively chosen to work with Combs up until 2020. Of course, I'm sure the fact that he was one of the most powerful men in the industry who persistently and verifiably made threats against others about ending their careers and lives has nothing to do with that decision. Diddy won't change the record. Opportunism is all he can respond with to explain the mounting claims against him. But what about the people who haven't made claims? What about the people who can't? Kim Porter was a model and actress who, between the years of 1994 and 2007, had an intermittent relationship with P. Diddy that was often marked by Diddy's escapades with other women. She ultimately broke off this relationship when she discovered that Combs had fathered children with longtime associate Sarah Chapman. In spite of all of this, they were said to be on friendly terms until her sudden death in November of 2018. Diddy even released a tribute song to her on his 2023 album titled Kim Porter, in case there was any ambiguity as to who it was for. Although at the time, it appeared there wasn't much to talk about regarding the relationship they shared. As tides turned against Diddy's reputation, their 13-year affair drew more critical attention from those who claimed to have known the late actress.
Oh, so it is her official book?
Yes.
And no one touched it?
Nobody altered it? No.
So it's not the copy that the gentleman said that he was selling before? No.
No.
It's two different copies. That one was edited.
Shortly after the horrific video of Diddy attacking and abusing Cassie Ventura made the rounds online, Sudanese-American author and self-proclaimed mistress of Osama bin Laden, Kola Boof, took to Twitter to level various accusations against him that she claims she'd heard firsthand over numerous phone conversations with the departed. These include the claims that Diddy often pitted Porter against Cassie, playing off colorist tropes, making Porter leave his bed to make way for him and Cassie, even making Kim Porter lick Ventura's tampon. Boof also made further claims that Diddy, quote, beat the shit out of Porter during their relationship, confirms that she was indeed writing a book about her experiences, and asserts that she believes Combs played a role in her death. Although she admits she has no direct evidence, this is a story that she had expounded shortly after Porter's death in 2018, so it doesn't appear to be motivated by anything material, at least. With that said, Boof isn't uncontroversial either, and her past has regularly been scrutinized, including the claims that she was under FBI protection that were disputed by none other than the FBI. Many of these present claims about Diddy also drew scrutiny because people felt they were very unsympathetic to Cassie's victimhood, which, yeah, I can see that. Yet with all these criticisms in mind, it still drew renowned attention to the relationship between Combs and Porter, and not too long after more compelling evidence documenting Diddy's abuse resurfaced. In 2022, one user also claimed that in 2005, Diddy broke Kim Porter's nose on a yacht before flying out a plastic surgeon to fix it, and that there had been a wide cover-up following the incident. It's difficult to find any official articles on this from the time, though it seems The Sun originally published a lost article with various pictures that gossip forum users believed provided substance to the claims. I can't confirm anything here, but it seems in the quotes from the article, Porter does mention a nose injury before saying it was due to a fall. This cannot be written off, but it is suspicious given that eyewitnesses heard arguing prior to this injury. A few days after Cola Booth had taken to Twitter, an interview with P. Diddy's former head of security, Roger Bonds, was released, in which he talks about a lot of his former employer's conduct, including his violent nature in regard to women, something he says he had witnessed 4 or 5 times while working under the music mogul. This included Kim Porter, who the bodyguard said he witnessed Diddy grab and smack on at least one occasion. 2 weeks later, in an interview with Vlad TV, Bond stated that the yacht incident was all too real.
Then I picked him up and the yacht came back and I seen Kim's nose taped up. It was whispers all around the office of everything that happened because his assistants were there and they was talking about it. He tried to say that she hit a table, but everybody in the office and everybody that was immediate around him knew exactly what happened.
Bonds' story is given credence by the fact that he is named in Ventura's settled lawsuit and that this story has been corroborated for nearly 2 decades, but was there the possibility that this could all be confirmed by Porter herself from beyond the grave? Shortly after Cassie filed her lawsuit against Combs, a Twitter user claimed that Kim Porter had been writing a tell-all book on Diddy's debauchery before she died. This wasn't the first time this rumor had been circulated, and many believe this memoir may have corroborated the allegations that we are now all too aware of, and that Diddy may have been involved in her death to prevent the release of such information. This story remained quiet mostly before news began to circulate that information from the personal diary had been retrieved. Radar Online briefly released an article at the end of July which claimed to detail a 40-page manuscript that had been turned over to them by the departed's friends, and though the excerpts seemed to be written compellingly, this was removed likely after it couldn't be verified and lawyers came knocking. Just under 2 months later, a full alleged memoir was released on Amazon, reaching the #1 bestseller spot on the online retailer. However, this was also pulled after various inconsistencies pointed towards it being a fraudulent farce. In fact, parts of it read more like Diddy Shades of Grey than a serious divulgence. Part of the public's response to this memoir was a statement from the children of Porter, who didn't just denounce the novel, but all those who had speculated about the late actress's relationship with Diddy. Posting on Instagram on September the 25th, a joint statement that insists there was no foul play involved in the death of Porter, and that anybody publicly claiming to be a friend is no friend at all, likely in reference to Cola Booth. They request people cease theorizing and let her rest for everyone's peace of mind. I don't think this is an unreasonable statement on principle, and the alleged memoir that was released was extremely disrespectful, particularly in how it portrayed Kim. Nevertheless, this does undermine the eyewitness testimony from credible figures in Porter and Combs' life. It cannot negate the possibility that something awful has happened, and just because she's dead, it does not mean she's undeserving of any advocacy because she cannot advocate for herself. How are any of us to know how exactly she was treated? How are we to know if she was chronicling that or not? People don't share everything with their family, and when we have substantial evidence that someone is a sex trafficking, violent, manipulative, and abusive individual, we need to have the uncomfortable conversation that there may be those who are more seriously affected to the point that they cannot speak out anymore. I should note that Combs and Porter's children have been vocal in defending their disgraced father, with one of them even calling the allegations conspiracy theories and false narratives. Even if we can't say whether Diddy played the immediate role in Kim Porter's tragic passing, even if we don't take certain testimony at face value, we can say that he likely played a detrimental role in her life, and that there may be things we never know because of it. How Diddy treated her in the relationship was still deplorable, and while his playboy persona may have excused it in the media, on reflection, he was not just continuously cheating on her, but fathering children with other women, something that Porter did say before her death.
When someone cheats and they have a child with someone else, that's my boundaries. That's, for me, that's where I draw the line.
In Don Richard's lawsuit, Richard talks about witnessing Porter leaving Diddy's recording studio with visible injuries. In July, female music executive and former Vibe magazine editor Daniel Smith recalled a situation where Combs confiscated Porter's bank cards and yelled at her in public because she wasn't home with the kids. Important to add is this is part of an article that was inspired by a situation in which Diddy told Smith that he would see her, quote, dead in the trunk of a car after an argument, which not only underlines the fact that Diddy had next to no respect for Porter, but that he had no respect for any other woman at that. Unfortunately, for Porter's loved ones, there is no longer speculation. It is reality. And for someone who was close to Diddy on and off for 13 years, that was likely something she experienced firsthand. It doesn't make her legacy any less respected, it just makes it more relevant. Her story needs to be told to understand that tragically, with Diddy's behavior, there were no real exceptions. Innocent or guilty, we don't need a legal case to see how Diddy ruined people, but it helps.
My name is Damian Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution.
Part of the defense case in many of these lawsuits was the notion that if Diddy was being accused of all these criminal acts, then why hasn't he been convicted of them? I would argue that Diddy and his circle's perceived power and continued threats are probably what kept people silent for the longest time, but a judge might be forced to at least consider the counterpoint that Diddy's civil and criminal cases don't tell the same story. Or at least they didn't until the 17th of September, when Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, released a statement that Sean John Combs, also known as P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Love, Brother Love, and Sean John had been arrested on charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. They state here that this is regarding behavior investigated between 2008 to the present day, which means that these charges don't actually account for a lot that is alleged to have happened in the 90s and 2000s. Much of the details listed in this announcement, though, do not differ from the testimony given by many of those who he is thought to have victimized.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York.
The full indictment, which was filed on the 12th of September, goes into more detail as to the charges Combs was facing, stating that by using his employees, resources, and influence, he had created a criminal enterprise that engaged in a variety of criminal activities, such as sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnap, and arson. They also note his persistent abusive behavior towards women and others around him, along with his consistent distribution and supply of drugs to them, using his power as leverage to make sure they were under his control at all times. They also reference a few confirmed incidents, most notably the CCTV footage that shows him violently beating Cassie Ventura at a hotel, and state that Combs attempted to pay off witnesses and staff members in regard to that incident. One of the recurring themes in this indictment is mention of the Combs Enterprise, something that prosecutors identify as the criminal organization operated by Diddy. They theorize that this Combs Enterprise oversaw many of the aforementioned illegal operations and enabled Combs to participate in many of his illegal activities outlined by witnesses and plaintiffs. Freak-offs also became a more formal term here as well, seeming to identify the many depraved functions that Combs was known to orchestrate. This indictment alleges that such freak-offs would often last days and involve Diddy dealing out controlled substances to commercial sex workers, occasionally filming these orgies without their consent and providing sex workers with IV fluids after said events to help them recover. Part of these freak-off supplies were the infamous 1,000 bottles of baby oil that were recovered from his Miami residence, which became headline news immediately. When one of Diddy's attorneys tried to write this off as, he has a big house, he buys in bulk. I think they have Costco's in every place he has a home. Costco themselves clarified to TMZ that they do not sell baby oil in bulk at any of their American stores. Not even Costco wants anything to do with this creep. Other details of the raid earlier in the the year revealed the discovery of firearms, such as AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, a common method used by criminals to prevent weapons from being tied to previous locations and incidents, which I should emphasize is also in line with what we heard in the original Lil Rod lawsuit as well. Many of the victims of these freak-offs are reported to have experienced physical violence, stalking, and threats from Combs, who used his power and incriminating recordings to solicit servitude from his victims. The indictment also alleges that members of Combs' enterprise would prevent victims from leaving Combs' premises or hotels, and in many instances they were forced to stay in hiding until their wounds had healed, with Combs regularly using his enterprise to track and pursue any victims who fled his abuse. The indictment states he regularly fed false narratives to victims and colleagues to explain any evidence that could be used against him, creating an entirely contained criminal network that allowed Diddy to basically be his own judge, jury, and executioner, which is a terrifying thought to say the very least. With all of this new information, all the many lawsuits we've spoken about today and in the previous video that seem completely plausible, and in spite of the pleas by Diddy's lawyers that this is merely an innocent man who made mistakes, the physical evidence recovered from Diddy's estates and the narrative presented by this indictment make for a formidable case. I need you to really visualize for a second 1,000 bottles of baby oil. That's more than they even have at the store, I'm pretty sure. Diddy was preparing for a nuclear winter or something. In response to the charges, Diddy pleaded not guilty, with the judge deciding that he would be held without bail. His attorneys protested, stating that they would offer multiple concessions, such as the surrender of his passport and weekly drug tests along with visitor logs, but by now it was clear that what they were dealing with was someone who could potentially be more powerful than any condition they enforced on him as a free man. And since then, up to $50 million bails have been repeatedly denied, as the concerns surrounding witness tampering and obstruction of justice are priceless. So Diddy was taken away, assigned a jail cell with SBF, a man with a net worth of over $25 billion at the peak of his career, perhaps a stark reminder that no matter how powerful you are, justice can still find you. The truth of this indictment was that Diddy had an uphill battle to fight, if he really had any case at all, and this battle was only going to become more difficult as more damning cases were brought against him.
Enemy half inbound. Hostile counter UAV established above.
With the arrest of Diddy, you might begin to wonder if this would affect the number of lawsuits that were being filed against him. And the answer to that is no, not really. In fact, his arrest might actually increase the number of civil cases being raised, as more people probably felt there was more confirmation that this behavior was plausible in his life. And around a week after his arrest, another lawsuit was raised that seemed emblematic of Diddy's dangerous nature. Talia Graves is a woman whose boyfriend once worked at Bad Boy Entertainment at the end of the 90s and start of the 2000s. Towards the end of September this year, she filed a lawsuit with the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, stating that during her boyfriend's tenure at the company, Diddy and his bodyguard, Joseph Sherman, had violently sexually attacked and raped her. This occurred in a way that is much akin to what we expect from Diddy at this point. Combs contacted Graves under the pretense that he was concerned about her boyfriend's work performance. Graves, who knew Diddy from company events and office visits, was dedicated to helping her partner ascend the ladder and agreed to meet Combs to discuss where these performance issues existed. When she met Combs in an SUV, he handed her a glass of wine, which she proceeded to drink. However, after a while, she began to feel disoriented, and not too long after arriving at the Bad Boy Entertainment Studios in New York, she lost consciousness. Talia then awoke to what were many violent sexual assaults perpetrated by Combs and Sherman that would be excessive to verbally detail here. But Graves emphasized just how powerless she truly was in this scenario. Outside of the drugging, Graves was only 4'11" and weighed 103 pounds at the time, and was utterly defenseless against the repeated attacks from Combs and his associate, who went by the name of Big Joe. Despite all the visible trauma that Graves was experiencing, Combs and Sherman continued and repeated various sexual assaults while Graves slipped in and out of consciousness. When she finally woke up to see her attackers gone, she hastily threw on what remained of her clothes and called her friend, who picked her up and took her to the hospital. However, she was too traumatized to even leave the vehicle, afraid of what Combs might do if they were to find out she had reported him for the rape. In the years following, Combs and Sherman continuously made threats towards Graves as to what would happen if she were to report this. And although she disclosed this violation to her then boyfriend, her boyfriend also discouraged her from going public out of fear of what would happen to his career. Ultimately, she ended up remaining silent for many years and lived with serious and persistent mental trauma that has manifested itself in various forms, including attempts at suicide, panic attacks, and PTSD. In 2023, following the venture,
I didn't like his beard, so I took matters into my own hands.
My sinister sister in Christ! No! Your poor husband!
Super mean. He was devastated.
This isn't what they meant by bride and groom, lady!
Why would you do that? What if I took that and I cut your hair off?
I told you I didn't like your beard.
If it's not your face, it's not your place!
If I took that and cut your hair,
you better not.
It would be abuse or something, but you do it to me and it's fine. You keep doing all this crap to me.
I am more frustrated than a rooster running on too much sleep.
This is my beard. You know there's something very important to me.
Or just laugh at him. Okay, I'm turning myself into a taquito.
Eliminate all threats.
Babe, it took me 2 years. But you do it to me and it's fine.
Your beard will grow back.
Yeah, it'll grow back in 2 years. You rich.
I didn't like his beard, so I took matters into my own hands.
My sinister sister in Christ! No! Your poor husband!
He was devastated.
This isn't what they meant by bride and groom, lady!
Why would you do that? What if I took that and I cut your hair off?
I told you I didn't like your beard.
If it's not your face, it's not your place!
If I took that and cut your hair,
you better not.
It would be abuse or something, but you do it to me and it's fine. You keep doing all this crap to me.
I am more frustrated than a rooster running on too much sleep.
This is my beard.
Hey, babe.
Restroom. Stick it in your own restroom. For my safety, never mind.
Bro, this is pure flirting right now. He is flirting with Emma. He's like, I don't want to in my restroom. Like, he's playing dumb. He's all flustered. He's letting her talk over him. Piers is down bad, dude.
I would be.
I gotta shout out Emma Vigeland. She was so awesome on Piers Morgan. Just more crazy anti-trans
Yeah, I would do
stuff.
anything for Emma.
And this was a conversation that was like a few years old, and honestly, I thought we were kind of past it, but it looks like it is not dead yet, so we gotta keep defending trans.
This is about Nancy Mace, who had talked about the fact that she was a victim of rape within the context of why she was trying to ban the Representative McBride, who is the first openly trans lawmaker in Congress, from using the women's restroom.
Talking here about Nancy Mace, who loves a camera in her face and loves attention wherever she can get it. You know, I find it pretty disgusting that she is basically implying that this trans lawmaker, just by being in her presence in the bathroom, may rape her. I do choose to speak up for women's rights. I believe that I do so on my program, The Majority Report, regularly. And I'm disgusted that Nancy Mace has decided essentially to support Donald Trump wholeheartedly, who has been found liable of sexual abuse in court, and multiple of his cabinet appointments, picks, including Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz, have been credibly accused of sexual assault themselves. So apparently it's triggering for her because
when you say credibly
may be slightly different.
All of them.
That is something that I have been advocating for. If you are going to push against Republicans, I think there's a pretty strong argument you can make in saying that all of the Republicans are sex criminals. Pretty much every single person that Trump has appointed to his cabinet has had some kind of sexual indiscretion in the past. Matt Gaetz's apparently was too big even for Donald Trump. And I mean, there's a funny pattern there. Donald Trump himself has been found civilly liable for, he is bragged about sexually assaulting women. definitely not treated women well in the past and seen them only as sexual objects. Done like some Harvey Weinstein shit, like traded sex for favors. And again, like the connections to Epstein are there. The connections to these crazy ass fucking billionaires are there. I think that that's something that the Democrats can really co-opt, the whole idea of elite sex criminals running Washington. 4 years of that is going to be pretty rough on the Republicans, in my opinion.
When you say credibly accused,
but it doesn't matter.
And then also while we're on the topic of trans people, you can add in the idea that Republicans are all sex perverts by talking about trans people. What is the deal with bathroom bills? They want to have someone checking the genitals of every single kid as they choose which bathroom to use. Why do Republicans want adults to check your children's genitals as they're just trying to urinate or defecate between class? Like, what's the deal with that? And I think that's like a pretty effective way to communicate trans issues to people, because essentially what's like the two biggest issues people have? Trans kids in sports and trans people in the bathrooms. Both of those are insane, and at least with the bathrooms one, you can really tie that into like this sexual perverseness that Republicans consistently demonstrate that they have.
That Trump has been found liable of sexual assault in court. Piers, has Trump been found liable of sexual assault in court?
Trump was found guilty in a civil action.
He's such a bitch, dude. Time out. You can't just keep talking. You can't keep talking, Emma. You can't talk. This is my show, Emma.
He denied it, as you know. And in case of Gates and P. Hesketh,
so the preponderance of evidence went in her direction.
Wow. Donald Trump denied that he raped someone, even though he's found liable for it by a civil court. Amazing Piers.
Sorry, can I just jump in real quick?
I gotta run back Piers Morgan getting triggered by Emma talking over him. It's so good.
Accused of sexual assault themselves. So apparently it's triggering for her because someone
when you say credibly accused,
slightly different.
All of them. When you say credibly accused,
but it doesn't
last two
matter
names
to
you
her
mentioned,
that Trump has been found liable of sexual assault in court. Piers, has Trump been found liable of sexual assault in court with
Trump was found guilty in a civil action. He denied it, as you know.
Found
and in case of
found liable of sexual assault in court. Piers, has Trump been found liable of sexual?
Bro, what is with all of the faces that these other people are making? This guy looks like he's raising his hand to try to ask for an excuse to use the bathroom. This woman looks like she's just smelled something revolting. This woman doesn't even, I don't know, she looks like she doesn't know where she is at the moment.
In court with
I see this woman on like these Jew.
Oh, she's a right-wing piece of shit. Yeah, fuck this, whoever this, I forget her name, but she's a right-wing butthole.
Bully or whatever type videos. Oh, God, she's so annoying. She's a Republican.
Was found guilty in a civil action. He denied it, as you know. And in case of Gates and P. Hesketh,
so the preponderance of evidence went in her direction.
Sorry, can I just jump in real quick here? Because what's great here,
Bro, I love how Emma has the ability to cut through Piers, because a lot of times Piers will shut up people. I mean, he was able to shut up Kyle Kalinske at points. Emma just kept bulldozing through it, and she's just like a ship through ice. She's like an oil tanker cutting through an ice flow and just making its own path when Piers is trying to cut her off.
What Piers wants to say is they've denied it.
Yeah.
But Piers, Emma said credibly accused. So you, with your fucking suit jacket, have to say, I don't think that's credible. He doesn't want to say that. All he wants to do is lean on, you shut up, let me say that they've denied it.
And even if the allegations, say in theory, were proven to be false, it still would make more sense for Nancy Mace to be more afraid of people who had been accused of rape and sexual assault than somebody who was just a trans woman using the restroom.
Yeah. Or, concerned about abortion, but whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, Piers Morgan is trying to turn it into a he said, she said incident, as though like there is not a congressional like committee looking into the allegations against Matt Gaetz.
And clear pattern with others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And went in her direction. And she's been.
Oh my God, he's so cute when he's angry.
He has been accused by dozens of women. There you go.
Are you finished?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
When we have a debate, the customary for the host leads it, and you respond to questions. Okay, if I may be so bold. The point is that Hesketh and Gates have categorically denied.
He's so mad when he has to refer back to like the rules of decorum.
Any wrongdoing, and none has been proven against them. In Trump's case, it was a civil action, as you know, not a criminal action. The criminal case against him was shuffling paperwork over an alleged one-night stand with a porn star. So it's not quite how you categorized it. Deborah Lee, let me bring you in here.
Has this trans lawmaker been accused of rape? Has this trans lawmaker?
No, but actually, if you are a congresswoman who survives sexual assault, you should be entitled to feel safe in the restroom.
The presence of a trans woman in the bathroom. Oh gosh, you know, here in New York, there are a lot of multi-gender bathrooms, and I've gone to the bathroom next to a man. Oh my goodness,
Bro, here's his face. He's like, oh my God, what? Oh, you bathroom next to me. Piers is like getting a little hot under the collar, man. He's so red. I think Piers has a thing for Emma, honestly. I think he has I do think Piers has like a humiliation fetish. He really enjoys just getting like trampled over. But he wants to make his guests work for him, right? Piers will get on, he'll get all of these guests together, and he gets off on like being the dominant one over them, right? He wants to control the conversation. But when someone rips that control out from underneath him, that does something to him. He's like Emma got him going a little bit.
Fearful. What was
I would actually be quite fearful if I found you lurking next to me in a
I love how Emma says, like there's mixed gender bathrooms in New York. Where I live, there's a few clubs with mixed gender bathrooms there too. You can go in and there's like a urinal next to a stall. You're using the urinal. A woman will just walk in and use the stall. It's not a big deal.
Enemy UAV
Emma says there's mixed gender bathrooms in New York. Piers immediately goes to, well, I'd feel uncomfortable if you were lurking next to me. He immediately inserts himself into the situation and imagines him and Emma in the bathroom together. Love that for him. He's having a good time too.
I just think that is.
No, keep going. Yeah.
I feel fearful. Deborah Lee, let me bring you in here. I just think
that is a ridiculous accusation, Piers. And I think that
it's a state of the fact. I would feel fearful.
You would feel uncomfortable? Why would you feel
you were lurking around me in the men's urinal, damn right I'd feel uncomfortable.
Okay, I mean, maybe if Piers is talking about how if he's aroused, he's uncomfortable, and that's what he's talking about. I mean, fair play, Piers, fair play.
Who's lurking?
Well, what else would you be doing there?
Is this lawmaker lurking?
What else would you be doing there?
Going to the restroom.
I don't want you going in my restroom. Stick it in your own restroom. For my safety,
bro, this is Piers flirting right now. He is flirting with Emma. He's like, I don't want you in my restroom. Like, he's playing dumb. He's all flustered. He's letting her talk over him. Piers is down bad, dude. I mean, it's the same thing with Tim Pool, right? Tim Pool is so flustered by Emma. She has his way with people, man.
On yours.
But would a man be
Emma
okay
could have her
with
way with me. She can do
biological
whatever the fuck she wants.
That's the whole point.
Also, I think this is like the longest I've ever seen on a Piers show where the other three people have not said a single word. It's been like 5 minutes of interaction between Emma and Piers, or maybe like 2 or 3, and these people haven't said a peep.
Why is there something inherently perverted about going to the bathroom? You right-wingers, and yes, I'm including you in this with this classical liberal BS, are so bad faith. It's incredible. You are linking sexual abuse and sexual assault to trans people inherently, and that is a bigoted.
No, I want trans people to have.
There she goes. Absolutely not.
Just not where it raise women's rights. But Deborah Lee, you've been listening to this patient.
But separate but equal.
No.
Oh my God, that was so good, dude. That was so good. You can definitely sense like the other three panelists respected the connection between Emma and Piers. But anyway, Emma dog walked Piers.
Hostile down to hardpoint. Hostile counter UAV established above.
Full of people in the world that I can sit in a room with twice. You know, you were not on that list yet. This is going great so far.
I'm aspiring to it, though.
People always wanted me to do a podcast. I was like, the only way I would do it, I don't want to have guests. I don't want to have to do the booking that you have to do. I'm sure that's a pain in the ass, even though you don't do it. So I thought if I just sit with my friend, and we started doing it at the NFL Network. Really, it was like a guerrilla project where I would just come in secretly and put it out on their feed, and we kept waiting for Greg to get fired. And at the end of the season, the NFL was like, get out of here. We don't want to get you to get in trouble, but like go. And then we started the podcast again. And now we're with All Things Comedy. And I've been there for a while.
It's a different choice for you because surely you're watching everything that's happening in comedy. The way that podcast has sort of replaced what radio used to be. And you have chosen a specific economic lane with a friend that is apart from some of the other stuff. Because you doing a daily podcast, people would want access to you to see what your funny sounded like every day.
Sure. I mean, we do this once a week. Again, no guests. We don't talk about anything serious. It's very goofy. And it's not successful. You know, not a lot of people watch it, but that's fine because I make my money from stand-up. Greg makes his money from talking about sports. We don't want it to be the podcast. I think a lot of comics have gotten bad because they make too much money from the podcast. And so they're putting too much effort into that. I want my effort to go toward the stage.
Oh, you think it's been a little poisonous for the industry, the cotton candy of how sloppy you can be in a form 3 times a week, as opposed to the way you do it, which is clearly sculpted very carefully.
I mean, the podcast isn't sculpted. We're just going out there and doing it. But I think people have made so much money from podcasting that it's made stand-up comedy as an art form worse. I think that's without question is happening. People are making more money. If your success is making money, you're doing just as well. But if it's about making the art of stand-up comedy great, it's suffering. It's gotten bad.
I want to talk to you biographically about how you became who you became, and I don't know how close I can get here separating who you actually are versus the character you've created that has a persona that is unlike any that's allowed in comedy at the moment, where it seems like you have a lane where you can get away with things that no one else can get away with because your character is so finely honed on, yeah, I'm an offensive comic. I go right to the edge of the dark line and over.
Thank you. I saw someone describe it online as it's like my character just thinks that being an asshole is cool. And someone's just bragging about all the cool shit he's done. It couldn't be less cool. It's insane. But the audience has kind of latched on to the logic of the character, and yeah, I can get away with just about everything.
How did you create the character? Like, how did you get confident in creating the persona that would lead to the success that you wanted as the person who wasn't the persona?
The first step was faking your confidence. You know, I'm sure as when you started, being on TV yourself, you were faking it. You have no idea what you're doing, and you're terrified. And you faked that for a while, and I noticed that the audience didn't like me because of what I looked like. I was like a skinny, 23-year-old white kid who looked like everyone else in the lineup, of the show. And they didn't like me, so I thought, okay, playing a villain is interesting. Let's see if I can pull it off. And I was able to. And the more I played with that and leaned into being a jerk, and I know you don't like me, but I'm so good, you have to laugh anyway, it just took off for me.
That takes even more confidence, right? Than doing that. That's embracing villainy.
But the audience lets you. The audience tells you you're on the right path. We're laughing at this, so that certainly helped. But yeah, it was a confidence to say, I'm just going to go with this. I want to be different. I want to be unique, and I want to push the art form a little bit. And I was able to kind of find a way to do that, and it's aged with me. You see a lot of comics who get older, and their act doesn't work anymore, because they started out silly, like a frat guy, and then they're 50, and you're like, what the fuck is this? But I thought that my character will outlive me.
So how did you do all of that, though? How did you get to the point of trial and error on what it is that, like, the early days of grinding through, how am I going to develop my voice? What is it that I'm going to chase and become?
You're going to so many open mics, and you're just flailing, trying to find anything that will stick that they will laugh at. And so they didn't like me. I thought, well, what if I go up and I say, I don't like you either? You know, they would kind of laugh at that. And then I just leaned into it, or the joke wouldn't work. And they would hate my joke, and I would say, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you guys were cool. And they would laugh at that, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm finding new ways. You know, I remember Jay Moore came up to me after the show and says, I've never seen anyone talk to the audience like you do. And I said he was walking through the room, and I was like, you know, I wasn't always a stand-up comedian. You know, I used to be a regular old piece of shit like you guys. And the audience, he's like, I couldn't believe you got them to laugh at it. Like, I think that's what my talent is, being 22 years in. It's not so much the surprising punchline, it's getting you to believe me in the beginning of the joke. When I say my uncle used to babysit me as a kid, I get you to believe that. And so people are just like, oh, they're truly surprised by the twist because I got them right.
When you say change the art form, like when you say my character will outlive me, where and how along the journey, how many years into the journey did you get before you were like, it's not merely that I want to do this, it's that I want to leave an impression?
It was more getting into the business and realizing that my other avenues weren't going to be as successful. I wasn't going to be an actor. I wasn't going to be a podcaster. I wasn't going to do a lot of the things that other comics can do. So I thought, let me just focus everything into stand-up, and I'm just going to get great at this. If you get a sitcom, it takes you away from stand-up. If you get SNL, it takes you away from stand-up. I'm like, I'm just going to commit to this. And then as I would come up with a new hour each time, I was surprised that I was able to come up with so many new jokes to fill an hour. And then once I started to get like 3-4 hours, I was like, wow, if I can keep doing this, I can go for greatness. You know, and go for God level if I can keep it going for the next, 15 years. But it's just output.
What does your process look like? Is there suffering in how it is that you're a perfectionist and you make things and they have to be just so?
Not so much suffering, in terms of like I've got to go through depression or be upset. It's frustrating writing for sure. I mean, anyone who's ever written anything knows that. It's just a numbers game and putting the work in. I don't watch any stand-up when I'm working. And then when I go to write, I watch a new special every day. And I find something that I don't like. And like, what do I want to attack about here? The first 15 minutes of my new special, Bones and All, is like a direct answer to Dave Chappelle's 10 years of anti-trans material. That I'm like, okay, how can I talk about this without complaining about it? Just showing you that you suck.
Oh, wow. So you go through, when you get going, you're watching the specials of others to like really look at the things that you don't like?
Usually that's what jumps out to me. It's not so much what I don't like. It's like, how would I have done this? I'm not even saying they're wrong. It just, that makes me think this would be a good way to take it.
You couldn't have always been this confident in what you do. Like along the path at some points, like you're talking about embracing villainy, but where were the points in your career? The family's not supporting what you want to do. No. Comedy's hard as a career where you're not this confident in your talent.
You faked it. I thought that the people that I looked up to were confident. If you look up to Michael Jordan, you can copy his confidence before you can copy his shot. So I think that was just trying to match my talent level to my taste level. I think a lot of people get into art, they want to be a painter, they want to be a writer, and the things that they love about writing, it's great writing, and they're not that good yet, and you have to just hope that you can work hard enough to get to that level. People give up too quickly when it comes to being an artist, and I think if you can hang on through the tough part, then you can truly get great.
Well, tell me about the tough part, though. Tell me about the family not supporting what was, I imagine, a dream.
Sure, the family not supporting wasn't the tough part because I didn't expect them to. They were like, well, where's the money coming from? It was, and you're out with your friends doing open mics, and everyone's bad. Everyone's bad all the time, so you're just kind of grasping onto any sort of victory. I got to laugh at this open mic. I got this comic who's always been intimidating to me to tell me I have a good new joke. Those little victories meant so much, where you always thought you were about to get the phone call to do the Tonight Show. You had to think that, even though I was years off. It was like 4 or 5 years doing it until I got anything, but I always thought it was going to be the next day. I always thought that.
Because?
Because I was an idiot. I was dumb. I was 23, 24, and I thought I was so much better than I was. I thought my first 5-minute set, I thought I should be on TV. And if I go back and watch it now, I'll have a panic attack about how bad it was. You just had to be a little stupid. You know, that helped.
What did the struggle look like? What did the early years of it look like?
You know, at the time I enjoyed it, and I look back and I can't believe I survived it. It's like going through your couch cushions to get money to put in your gas tank. You know, having $0 ever. I remember eating ramen. I wouldn't even make the ramen. I would just eat the little bricks of ramen noodles. Oh, wow. And just always writing. If I had any money, I bought a case of beer and bought a little weed, and I would just sit on the couch with my laptop or a yellow legal pad, and I would just write hundreds of jokes every day. And most of them were terrible. I didn't know my voice yet, but I would just write so many and just try those out every night wherever I could.
How much doubt, how much fear was there?
A lot, but the bigger fear was not that I would fail. The fear was that I wouldn't know I was failing. Was that I would be one of those guys at the open mic who was like 20 years older than everyone else, doing the same 5 minutes and had no chance, but that's just what they were stuck in. They were stuck in this loop. That was scary to me. Being someone bad who didn't know they were bad. Hopefully that doesn't happen to me.
How many years or months were you eating the ramen by the brick? Like how long was the period of the grind?
Oh, years. I mean, I was living week to week until I was, I think, 30 years old. I got a job writing for Jimmy Fallon. And it was the first time I got a regular paycheck because even though I did well and I had a name, it wasn't a profitable name. Being super edgy with like 10 minutes of dark one-liners wasn't going to make me money. I had to kind of wait until I could do a special or something with that. The roasts really helped, but still it wasn't that profitable. You're not going to see me in a lot of commercials.
Well, the Trump roast was the break, right? Or you go right from there, from writer to, I've got a career, right?
Yeah. I remember firing my agents because I had an agent as a writer. They just represented me as a writer. I wasn't an actor or anything. And after the roast, it's like, well, now what am I going to do? I'm like, everyone in comedy is talking about me, and they're like, that's great, but what do you want to write on next? And I just fired him. He's like, I'm not a writer anymore. Like,
really?
Yeah. Those days are over.
Losing B.
Take me through all of that until that moment. So you're talking about 10 years of fear and doubt where you're wondering, am I hanging on too long? Mm-hmm. But you're not having the kind of success you expected, right? You're making a career, but you didn't expect for 10 years for it to be paycheck to paycheck.
Getting respect, but I thought that I would become a writer. I never thought that I would be a star myself. I thought I'm too dark for that. But comics who had a dark sense of humor will see me and say, come write for me. And Jimmy Kimmel asked me to write for him. Sarah Silverman asked me to write for her. And so I would do that, and then and then I started to write for Fallon. Hated that. They did not like my material. They knew they liked me, but they were like, Jimmy can't tell your jokes. People are going to hate Jimmy. I'm like, I agree with you. Why am I here? And so when I left, I started headlining for the first time and doing my own show. I'm not an opening actor anymore. And I'm struggling because I'm not enough of a name. I had to put out an album maybe, but people aren't coming to see me. They're coming to see comedy. A couple fans, and then people are like, why is this guy talking about dead babies for an hour? So I was bombing and struggling, and that ruins a lot of comics too, because they'll get good in LA or New York, and when they go on the road, their act doesn't work because the audience is dumb, and so they change their act. I never changed my act. I was like, I'm just gonna bomb. And then about a year into that process, I got the Trump roast, and overnight, the audience was filled with people who knew what I did and were there to see it. It changed everything. And it was like from the second I got on stage, just boom, applause, and they loved it.
A comedy cliche or trope is some idea that comedy comes from pain, but do you know, can you explain to me where your dark comes from?
I always thought dark was interesting, and I do not, to this day, I do not understand why it's so taboo. You know, I get that it might not be for the dinner table, but I don't understand why I was in trouble so much of my youth for being obsessed with death and thinking dark stuff was cool. You know, violent movies. Have you seen this movie, The Coffee Table? It's a Spanish horror film, and it is the most uncomfortable 90 minutes of your life. It's not gory. It's not like someone's getting tortured, but it is almost impossible to watch. I watched it with a huge smile on my face and was delighted. And 99% of the population, it's unwatchable. But I loved it so much, and that was kind of how I approached the comedy. Is let me just try to do the things I think are interesting and a little taboo, but shouldn't be. It's natural. Everyone does. And to just be hardcore. And those are the things that I looked up to. I didn't need to be the most famous guy. I get why Bert Kreischer is the biggest comedian in the world, but I never wanted to be that. I wanted to be kind of a niche, if you know, you know kind of thing.
Well, you're not going for likable. You're going for the you're not going for likable. You're almost saying in fact, you're saying almost calculated. I know I can't be likable and authentically as dark and me as I want to be. I'm gonna land wrong if I tell you I'm smarter than you and I know it.
That's how I try to do it. People somehow find me likable anyway. People will still say, when you smile, you know, we like you for that. And so I try to smile as little as I can on stage. In the special, it might be, I think people were surprised. They're like, yeah, you smiled in the second taping. We got it. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. And I am enjoying myself. But I just think the smile is a trick. It is you see a comic laugh at their own joke. That's a trick. You know, and I try not to use any of those tricks. It's harder that way, but it's more rewarding.
I still don't know though why attracted to dark or death from a young age. What's happening there?
You know, it just fascinated me. Reading a book where someone was killed. You know, people are obsessed with murder. People are obsessed with true crime. These like horrible, dark things. But for some reason, it was taboo. It was something you shouldn't speak about. And so I just never understood why. It just seemed the most interesting thing to me. You know, I loved the 80s violent movies, all the Schwarzenegger stuff, but like you couldn't talk about that. Alpha. Basic Instinct, as a 12-year-old boy, that was the most fascinating movie in the world to me, and you couldn't discuss it, and I didn't understand why. So I just thought, if you're really intelligent, then you can discuss difficult subjects without, you know, flipping out.
Is it as simple as you just liked it, or is there something else there in your raising and your upbringing, something that was happening around you?
It is as simple as I just liked it. I've never had someone close to me die. You know, my family was close. I was the oldest of 5 kids. Like, we got along. It just darkness attracted me. I'm surprised I wasn't goth. I think I was like too good looking to be a goth in high school. But if I could have been a goth, I would have.
What does that mean?
Most people are not comfortable.
Most goths are fucking out of shit, dude. What are you talking about?
Mortality.
Yeah.
That's the most absurd bullshit thing I've ever.
I think it's healthy to do so. And maybe the fact that I never lost someone is why I felt so cavalier about discussing it. Why it could be a joke to me. Whereas if I'd lost someone, probably not. Stephen Colbert once said that when you're young in comedy, you're edgy because none of these things have happened to you yet.
No, man, I've lost a lot of people, man. Fuck it.
And as you get older, things start happening to people that you know. It's happened to me. I've seen friends and family members have horrible things happen to them. So those things, it changes my relationship to them as comedic subjects.
I wouldn't imagine that you look at a whole lot of comedians and say that person is better at the craft of this than I am. Are there many that you just look at and you're awed and admire? Like, maybe I couldn't do it that way. They're different. That's for them. But I really admire what an artist that person is.
You know, I'm so specific and to my own horn, unique, that I don't compare myself to anyone. There's no one that I'm like, oh, they do it better than me. There are comics that I think are incredible, and there are very few. I could probably name them: Chris Rock, Doug Stanhope, Nate Bargatze, John Mulaney, and there are other people doing great stuff too. But those are the guys that I'm like, wow, I will watch anything they do. I kind of have to see it, but I wouldn't even say better, worse. No, I would just say like they're incredible. They're at my level.
Do you mind going through the wow of each of those for me as an artist viewing other artists and admiring the art of it? Like, go through those 4 guys you mentioned.
Sure. Chris Rock is more disciplined than any comic I've ever met. Just really studies the art form, knows what he's doing. It's not just about the laugh. It's about what he's saying, who he is. I respect him and admire everything about him. Doug Stanhope is an insane person who is like... He donated his body and his brain to comedy when he was 21 years old and never looked back. He's the most pure comic that exists in this world. Bill Burr, I think anything he talks about becomes infinitely funny. He finds an angle and it's organic, and he could just do hours and hours of comedy for the rest of his life. You'll never feel like he's taking it easy on you or getting soft. John Mulaney, I just think is brilliant. I want to see his take on things. I love his take as a performer, his charisma. And Nate Bargatze is a guy that I've been singing his praises for 10 years. Just clean, but in an organic way. and just smart. I don't want to look at a comic and think like, I know what you're saying. I've heard this before. Like, I know everything that you're doing. And a lot of comics do that, and that's okay. It's like some audiences want a little hacky. They want to kind of feel as smart as the comedian. Like, I've heard this before. I know this joke. I never wanted to do that. Have you ever seen a movie trailer for a comedy? And they put the biggest joke in the movie in the trailer, all right? So you've seen this trailer 100 times. You go to see the movie live opening night. You see the scene from the trailer is about to come on. Everyone in the movie has seen this trailer. That's why they're there. You think they shouldn't laugh at it. It's the biggest laugh of the movie because they feel comfortable laughing at it. And I wanted to eliminate that from stand-up. And I think those guys do that.
You pride yourself on the degree of difficulty on doing the hardest thing. The people I admire most among my friends are the people who will choose the hardest thing because it's the hardest thing, because of the nobility of it being the hardest thing.
It's not so much the nobility, it's just that I think that if you do the hardest thing, the final product is superior. You know, if it's harder to do, if your workout is harder, you're going to be in better shape. You know, I thought of it like that.
Are you a perfectionist about other things as well?
Not at all.
So it's just this one thing that you care about unreasonably deeply.
Yeah. It's just the one thing, like when I was growing up, it was a lot of you're not applying yourself. You should be doing much better. You're smart, but you're not. You're throwing your life away. And I just finally put my foot down and was like, comedy. Like, this is going to be, and just stand up. I don't care about improv. I don't care about sketch or movies. It's just stand up.
How old were you when that decision was made that decisively?
Probably 23. Probably I just moved out to LA and I was trying to find a job doing anything. And my friend Greg Greg and I had an internship out in LA in between junior and senior year at Tulane. And we both moved out here together, and he got the job at the internship, like the paid job, and I didn't. So for a year I was kind of struggling, and then just decided, like, what would be the treadmill that I could get on that would be productive, and just picked stand-up.
What was that year? Give me some of the details beyond the brick of ramen, some of the details that you remember of that year.
I remember I was working at a Borders Books and Music. Remember that with the Borders Books? And just wandering around the store so bored. And I would look at books while I was there because I just didn't want to help anybody. I was just wandering around. And I went to the comedy section, and there was a book about how to do stand-up comedy by Greg Dean. And it was the thinnest of all the books about stand-up comedy. So I stole it. I took it from my job. I went home, I read it, and it was like how to write jokes, how to do this. And at the end of the book, it said, this guy teaches a class in Santa Monica. And so I looked it up. It was, an hour's drive away. It was $350 for a 6-week class, and I paid the money. And by paying the money, I was committed. That $350 was all the money in the world to me, so I couldn't miss a class. I had to do open mics afterwards and just had to start working. And I remember I did the class. I did stand up. My friends come to the show, and they're like, you're amazing. And this is the set that if I watched it again, I would have a panic attack. And then I went and did an open mic for the first time outside the classroom, the supportive experience. And I bombed so hard. I remember I had 3 minutes, and I had 5 minutes of material. And all of a sudden, I'd done all the material, and I still had 2 minutes left. And I was covered in sweat, and I didn't know what was happening to me, but I knew I had to get off the stage. And I just ran out of the room, and I went into the bathroom and, like, calmed myself down. And I know now it was a panic attack. At the time, I had no idea. And then I couldn't get back on stage for months. I would drive to the open mic and sit outside and not get out of my car. And I couldn't tell my friends, I couldn't quit. Because being a stand-up comic before you're a name is embarrassing, but telling people you used to do stand-up comedy is the most humiliating thing I can think of. I'd rather tell people I'm a child molester than that I used to do stand-up comedy.
Oh, come on.
And it's less embarrassing. And then the movie Comedian came out. Did you ever see the movie Comedian?
I tell people about that movie all the time, and nobody's ever heard of it. And I'm like, you don't know how fascinating it is to see Seinfeld in a kitchen in Cleveland suffering the fact that he's got no act yet that he believes in, and watching Chris Rock and Seinfeld talk about Bill Cosby being, I can't believe more people haven't seen that movie.
Can't believe it. People tell me, how do I become a comedian? I say, watch that movie. And they look at me like, oh, it's 2 hours. I don't know. It should be like in museums. It's so perfect. I watch it at least once a year. I've watched the commentaries in that movie, but that movie taught me how to do it. Where I remember I walked from my house or my apartment to the theater, opening day at noon, saw that movie the day it came out and was like, got it. And then I just went to open mics every night. And it was like the more you bombed, the better it was. You think about it like you're going to do 1,000 sets in your lifetime. 200 of those are going to be terrible. So I wanted to try to get those 200 out of the way as quickly as I could. The more sets I do, the quicker I'll be good. And that's part of how I came up with the persona, was what if I was a genius who'd been doing this for 100 years.